Okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Regional School Committee for December 2nd. A little bit smaller crowd we have in the audience today. I guess we must not be talking about anything more controversial than the budget. So good to see our financial teams out there. So let's start with some of the fun things going on in the district. Start with the middle school. Mr. Shu.
Okay. Well, I'm Jeb Shu.
Hi, Jeb.
So some things going on in the middle school right now. Yesterday there was no school during a teacher workshop. That took all day. On Thursday, December 11th, there will be the first Annie performance at 7:30. On Friday, December 12th, the Term 2 interim reports will be posted on Aspen. And also on Friday, there will be another Annie performance at 7:30. On Saturday, December 13th, there will be an Annie performance at 1 o'clock and at 7:30. And from December 17th through December 19th, there will be the 6th grade Challenger field trip. Team Moon will go first, and then Team Lightning. Tuesday, December 23rd, there will be the school-wide geography meet. And from the 24th to January 2nd, there will be no school due to the holiday break. And on Monday, January 5th, school reopens. Just some student recognition. We would like to thank our MARC students and student council members who help facilitate our parent-teacher conferences, both as greeters and door knockers. These students graciously volunteered their time both on the 29th of October and November 6th, and their efforts resulted in a more efficient process for both the parents and teachers during those conferences. Let's see, the Environmental CAG, our Citizen Action Group, hosted an e-recycling day on Saturday, November 15th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Their efforts raised $650 for the 8th grade Washington, D.C. or Boston trip for the scholarship fund. The special thanks to Mrs. Bettigan, Mrs. Malloy, and Mrs. Weeder and Mrs. Lonergan for supervising these events. In addition, we appreciate the people who helped provide this event. Tika Roper, Ted Friesen, Andrew Fiore, Kaylee Hain, Jamie Hackney, and Alex Manoff. The 8th grade CAG groups, or Citizen Action Groups, recently held their in-school service day on Wednesday, November 26th. Each CAG performed a task on campus to improve our school. In addition, the Hunger and Homeless Citizen Action Groups sorted and delivered food to the Westwood Food Pantry, the Medway Village Food Pantry, and the Norfolk Food Pantry, and a food pantry located in the Framingham. So that's what's going on in the school.
Good, awesome. How's things going in general? Good.
Yeah, it's good.
Good emotion in the middle school these days? Excellent.
Things are going well.
Good.
You know anybody who's in Annie?
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking. Mr. Kellett.
Thank you. I just want to call attention to a couple of three of our staff members who recently presented at conferences. Laura Mullen and Anna Hurley presented at the MAST conference earlier this month, and were well received and had a fantastic opportunity to network and gather information about other districts and what they're doing. That was in large part through a grant from Positive. And another conference that was attended was by Veronica Moy and Laura Mullen. They traveled to Washington, D.C., thanks to DSEF, and presented at the National Council of Teachers of English.
And I have a souvenir for you.
All right.
Laura Mullen is providing us with a bookmark, and as is Veronica Moy. So
excellent. We can mark our budget books with
mark
them.
Your budget books with those.
Exactly.
One of the highlights there was Veronica Moy, who she never wants to call attention to herself. One of the things she shared with me is that a gentleman from California approached her and said the reason he traveled to the conference in Washington was to see her presentation.
That's great.
And Laura came to me after she had told me and said she might not mention this to you. So it really had an impact on her, and they represented us well and got back a lot of valuable information. And I reiterate what Jim said about Annie. If you have the opportunity, please come and see it. It will be outstanding, I am sure. And that's on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Finally, I just want to call your attention. Over the past few weeks, we beat the high school. We have TV up in the hall.
There you go.
And stream clips of students and so forth.
Great.
Anthony Bertacco has helped us with that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right, moving on to the high school. Catherine.
Okay. Hi, I'm Catherine Boland, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about what has happened last month and what is going to happen this month. So last month we ended Spirit Week, and that was very successful because we raised the most money we've ever raised, and I think it was something like around $4,000. Yeah, so it was a lot for Horizons for Homeless Children, which is a Boston-based charity. So that was really awesome, and the junior class won, which was really nice. And
Much that you're going to the senior class, I can assure
I
you.
heard they bought their Spirit prize.
well,
Sore losers.
it goes hand in hand. Spirit, you have to donate a little in order to get the edge. But, and then we also had homecoming, which was very successful. I think over 400 students attended, which is the most highly attended dance that we've ever hosted. And if I went to it, and the decorations were awesome. There was like a giant wall painted thing of like a mansion. It was so cool, and there was a wall to take pictures on, and they put all the superlatives up. So that was really cool, and hopefully we can continue that into next year. And then, so we also had the Thanksgiving no homework weekend, which was really successful. None of my teachers gave me homework, and that was really nice. And I don't think any of my friends or anyone that I talked to had homework as well. So I think most teachers kept up to their word on that one. And so this month is the start of winter sports. And so that's hockey, gymnastics, downhill skiing, Nordic skiing, basketball, swim team, and the newly put in indoor track team. So that's exciting. And then a few other things are coming up. We have our town meetings, so we'll get to hear a little bit about what the students want more out of their school life. And then we also have our toy drive. So that's what's happening.
Great.
That's great. And Jeb was wondering what happened to the homework free weekend. Short-changed.
Excellent. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Ms. White. I just wanted to echo what Catherine said about Spirit Week and the dance. Really, that entire week was fantastic. A lot of spirit in the school, a lot of fun. A lot of faculty got dressed up in those days too, which always makes it fun for the kids as well, and we're grateful for that. Just wanted to point out a couple things. Wanted to give certainly recognition to Julie Flavel, who is receiving a National Young Arts Foundation Merit Scholarship, and will be actually attending a series of workshops in New York City. There are 3 different locations that you can choose to go, and obviously New York being the closer one. So she came in, was all smiles, and was so thrilled. Thanks to Kristen Osiecki, her art teacher, who suggested she apply and really kind of helped her and motivated her to get this in, saying, you probably have a pretty good shot at it, and sure enough, she did. From the teaching standpoint, I wanted to point out that Anita Lottie, who is a current science teacher, chemistry teacher at the high school, has received her national board certification. Very, very intensive process that I believe took about 16 months. So Anita is thrilled and relieved, and probably has a lot of extra time in her hands that'll have to get a couple committees for her to serve on. But in all honesty, she really has done a tremendous job. She has said that the process really kind of changed how she looked at teaching, really made her a much more reflective learner, initiated a lot more collaboration amongst herself and her peers in her teaching. So we're very proud. I think she becomes the 3rd, right, teacher in the region with national board certification. So certainly a great accomplishment, and something that as administrators we're very, very proud of.
Do you know who the other 2 are?
Yes, Keith Kaplan and Randy Hoover.
Oh, great.
Yep. And the last thing that I just wanted to mention is we have kicked off our Distractology 101 week. The trailer is located in the back parking lot, the faculty parking lot. It's a distracted driving simulation program in which 2 students can participate in this computer simulation at once. They sign up during their directed research or after school, so they have opportunities to do both. There's a certified instructor there who works them through a whole series of distracted driving exercises. Mr. Bliss was there to witness me crashing into another car going around the corner, so that's not going to look very good on my evaluation, clearly.
That was an observation.
But it was, it really is great, and it's interesting. We opened it up to seniors because we had some more time, and so we put an email out to seniors, and a bunch of seniors came in today to sign up for it, and the feedback from the students was very, very positive. They thought it was neat. You know, it has that computer game feel. And some of them were very confident, I'm going to ace this, and then they realized...
Yeah, my daughter claims it was fixed, that she was going to crash every time, no matter what.
And I invite any member of the Regional School Committee, if you have any opportunities at any time during this week, to come in. I'd love to have you come in, show you the simulator, to kind of see what the kids are doing. It's just a great program. It is free of charge. It is sponsored by Arbella Insurance. It was developed by the UMass Medical School. And really is just a great program and another tool to kind of help our young drivers in making good decisions about things and just kind of recognizing how quickly things can happen on the road. And we know that as adults, but certainly I think with young drivers, just an important concept. So if your children haven't signed up already, we do have available slots and certainly have them do so.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. All right, on to the central office.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ms. White. In terms of central office updates, extracting from the report, first and foremost, we really want to thank Christine Tague. Chris has done just an incredible amount of work over the past 6 years as our business manager and is beginning to make plans for her retirement next summer. So
we've got a whole budget cycle to go through.
She'll look a lot more relieved in about March or April. But we thank Chris profusely. I mean, for those of us, we started actually the same time, we started the same year, 2009. And what Chris has been able to do in the business office has been really nothing short of remarkable. I mean, for those of us who've been around for a few years, in terms of the product of what's come out of the office. So Chris, we thank you. And we will definitely look to Chris for her counsel and her expertise as we begin to mold the process in looking for her successor. And in doing so, we would like to form, we had a meeting with the chairs, and would like to form what we're affectionately calling a business manager task force, not quite the search committee, but a task force, and would like a representative from each school committee to work with me and with Chris in looking at some of the functions and offices within the business office part of the central office and be able to chart a course over the next few months to find a successor to Chris who's equally as qualified and talented.
Yeah, isn't that a song?
In so many ways.
So I think I asked.
Discuss this last.
Yeah. So right. So Michael's going to do that, and then and Claire's going to help when it moves to more of a search process.
So Claire's all set for search.
For search, right.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
We also include in the report a little update on the Parent Social Norming campaign with SPAN DS. We put a plug in for the Internet Safety Night coming up February 12th. In addition, we want to just draw your attention, in the packet you'll have an updated, the historical average class size analysis. This was left off the class size report, and we apologize for that, but we wanted to make sure that was included in your report. And there was actually a request put forward to take a look not only at the average class size analysis, but to also look at the average class size of the high school if we were not to include small group classes, the real small classes. Right. So we ran those numbers today, and we have that as a handout for you. It doesn't really move the needle too much without that.
Because anecdotally, we're hearing large class size.
Right. It's just it was good to know that it wasn't skewing the data.
Yeah. Except I kind of feel like I don't know how to say this nicely. I almost feel like this doesn't really mean much, though, because the issue is not average class size, it's whether in particular classes you have high class size. So it's like, this is fine, but it doesn't change if there are 26 kids in class, if there are 26 kids in class.
It
Right.
does, and we
Right.
spent some time, myself and John Smith spent some time today on both two meetings in person on different issues and on the phone as well. And Mr. Smith, I don't know if you want to speak at all to that issue of the ranges and the.
Yeah, so,
Thank you.
one of the things that my assistant headmaster, Ann Keegan, has also done, in addition to outlining how many sections are there, the total number, the enrollment, and so yes, this gives you kind of a 10,000 foot view. It really is the range, the low and the high ranges, and what we looked at really were some science classes that were either at cap or in one case one over, but we were able to work it out. Math, we had a few with English as well, and really what we're focusing in on are those specific courses that have in that 24, 25, 26 range to develop some ideas to sort of help that both short-term and then perhaps even long-term, and later I think Mr. Bliss in his budget presentation will talk about that. But I agree, Carolyn, that really is the critical number, is looking at the high end. But when we did pull the small group out, it really didn't change our numbers that much, simply because we don't really have a lot of small group courses. We have a total of 7, but really 4 that are consistent and constant that we run each year.
So point well taken. We certainly heard that from Regional School Committee last month in terms of concern about class size, and you'll see a couple references to that in the budget presentation.
Right.
We are certainly cognizant of it.
Any other questions on class size?
On the student recognition section, we really want to extend a congratulations to the Sherborn Community Center, the student directors, who did a great job, and I included in the actual thank you note from Joanne Barry, the executive director of A Place to Turn. The students did a wonderful job together with our member communities and neighboring communities in terms of raising food for the recent food drive. As well, I had the distinct pleasure of being at the State House 2 weeks ago, I guess Friday afternoon, with Ann Keegan, Dover-Sherborn High School assistant headmaster, for the swearing-in ceremony with Christopher Devine, one of our students at the high school. Christopher was accepted onto the Governor's Youth Council and was part of a large swearing-in ceremony on the grand staircase of the second floor of the State House. And we were there and had the opportunity to chat a little bit with Secretary of Education Matt Malone, certainly Governor Patrick, and it was really a wonderful opportunity to celebrate that experience with Christopher. He had his whole extended family there. It was, and we couldn't have a better ambassador. I'm sure, I would agree. So we want to recognize Christopher for that. As well, we had a number of DS student athletes who signed letters of intent, including Gina Burton, Abby Gannon, Grant Gregory, Carolyn Bono, Molly McGill. Hope I'm not leaving anyone off the list. Yep, all 5 are mentioned. What an incredible accolade for them and for their families. Congratulations to them. In addition, as Mr. Smith indicates, Anita Lottie, we extend heartfelt congratulations to her. It's quite an accomplishment. It's an enormous body of work to be recognized and certified as National Board Teacher, as NBCT classified now. So we recognize Anita for that incredible accomplishment. And we put some links in your report, so you can read up on that as well. And also, if you haven't noticed, the Champions Board at the Nora Searle Field, certainly draw your attention to that, to the press box. It's really very phenomenal, and we've included a picture of it in the report here. So it's a great addition, and we thank the boosters for their contribution. And Ms. Keegan's also planning a chemical health night on the evening of March 9th. So we're looking for all plugs humanly imaginable for that night. It's a great event, and we encourage everyone to attend. Those are the highlights from the report. The only other thing that we included in your packet was the scheduling committee. The Dover-Sherborn High School, Middle School Scheduling Committee provided an executive summary to myself and by extension to the Regional School Committee, highlighting some of the work that's gone on over the past few months. So we draw your attention to that memo. We're certainly happy to answer any questions you may have about it.
I have to say, I mean, I appreciate all the work that was done. I was sad to see that there wasn't a course of action that was obvious
Not
to
yet.
come out of it.
Yeah, not yet.
Maybe I was being a little
And on the flip
optimistic.
side, having been here a long time, it was of no surprise.
Well,
I mean,
okay, that's fair.
Because in fairness, I think many administrators over the last 10 years have tried to figure out the conundrum of the rotating schedules, the lunch, the buildings, those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
how do you combine that?
I mean, and granted, this is only my observation based on what was written, but it looks like neither side, or not neither side, neither party is willing to give up so many pieces to what they have, and if both people are there, you're never gonna, somebody has to be willing to give up some of those things if they're ever gonna change it. It was the reading that I got from there, and nobody's there yet.
Yeah, and I think there was also the recognition that at the moment, it's not as critical an issue at the moment because the enrollment is where it is. So it was really a very thoughtful group, and when we met with them, they said we're perfectly willing to bring different ideas to the table. They felt as if there was a little bit of a stopwatch running against them from the time the group came together, and that probably was an unfair expectation to put on the group because there really need not be that. Really, I mean, it wasn't like we gave them 90 days to come up with something or else. I share your sentiment that I think eventually something will have to be administratively decided, and that'll be it. And we'll have to make a move because I think you're right, Dana and Claire, to the point that I don't know, they could probably stay together for a few years and probably not arrive at something that they're really both in agreement on.
Would it be possible to at least have a report out that has what was looked at and the pros and the cons of each of the options so that we have some kind of work product coming out of that?
Well, there was a fair amount in that memo. I mean,
Right.
certainly alluded to, it wasn't as...
More of a structured way of the impact to the high school, the impact to the middle school for each of the specific options that were...
I would only say that to ask for such a thing may be premature. If this group is giving more than lip service to the idea of keeping going, why not just let it be fluid?
Right.
And I mean, I think you know, the whole administrative team has grasped so many different initiatives in the past couple of years. The fact that this one is not also over the goal line, to me, is not really A, surprising, and B, all that disappointing. It's, you know, it should come, and maybe this is just the first pass at it.
There may be other things that change within the two schools over
Yeah.
the course of the next couple of years that will then
I would
make that a little bit easier.
I would like to see the dialogue continue because I would hate to get to a point where the budget starts driving the discussion. Because at some point, as the enrollments decline, if indeed they do, where we do really need to be sharing teachers short of riffing or doing something smarter with our assets, I would hate for that to be the driver of the timeline, as opposed to if it is more of a complex discussion than maybe I had imagined. It seems like something like the evaluation system, like other things that just take time to sort through.
Yeah, I certainly don't think we're going to let it just sort of lay dormant. I mean,
Right.
There really is a desire to have it be something that's controlled.
Yeah.
Control it instead of letting it control
Instead of reacting.
Instead of
Exactly.
reacting to it. So, but there are definitely tenets of each schedule that both sides, both middle school and high school faculty members, really were, in the interest of kids, were really not movable on saying, you know, this is really not something we want to give up on either side.
The only thing I would challenge to that is there are independent schools that are 7 through 12 schools that somehow figure it out, that have the same schedule for grade 7 and grade 12. So it's doable. It's not what we've done. So, and I know they talked about the comparables, so I'm not going to ask which schools they looked at, but I'm sure there are models that meet the needs of all students that aren't too different.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, we could absolutely say this is the model, and this
Right.
is what X school uses, and this is what we'll use. And it may ultimately come out to that at some point, but we'd like for the discussion to continue for the purpose of the collaboration.
That makes sense. Any other thoughts on that? Great. Awesome. We'll definitely thank the committee for the work, because it is a complex issue to be dealing with. So we really appreciate the start of the conversation.
Anything else, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Smith, on that?
It's when you have the needs of 11-year-olds versus 18-year-olds, it's
Right.
Yeah.
causes a lot of dialogue. And the other complicating factor.
Absolutely.
Shared spaces, lunches, and
Right.
shared staff, it makes it quite complex.
Definitely.
Thank you, thank you. And that was really it. Dr. Ledoux.
I just wanted to bring you up to date on the international students. You recognize that last spring we were afforded the opportunity to accept F1 visas for potential use of those international students. And I wrote to 4 third-party vendors. Mr. Smith and I interviewed the 2 who did respond, Educationist International and the Cambridge Institute of International Education. You can see the questions that we asked, talked about the profile of the student, of the host families, the liaisons, the application, and the fee structure. We met afterwards, and both Mr. Smith and I agreed that Educationist was the firm that would be the best suited for the needs as were articulated. I'm passing out some information from Educationist. We're certainly prepared to take questions this evening, but maybe in light of this additional information, I'd like to discuss this at the January meeting. I certainly leave it up to you.
What do you think is the schedule
I
for
was just going
going
to
forward?
In order for us to accept potential students for next year, we actually need to be in education materials by the spring. Because it's a technology-rich environment, once we're out there, we're out there. In my previous district, we accepted semester students. So that was January to June of 2016. And that seemed to work well.
You mean in the first year?
Yeah. And then looking at full-year students after that. And it gives you time to assimilate, understand, locate the host families and all of those things. Otherwise, we could accept full-year students for 16, 17 school year.
And when we push the button to go, we will have already had a discussion about tuition and how many and what kind of.
Yes, and education was helpful, and in my experience too, it's the cost per pupil is what was put forth. That we had about 17,000.
That could be, we could decide it costs us more than the normal cost per student because we're giving additional services.
Could be.
Correct.
Yeah. Some other districts that do this, that would be a very, I think that would be a high figure.
17,000 is a high figure.
Yeah, it would be high. No, it's not to say we couldn't quote it.
No, no, it's a decision that certainly will be made. Yeah.
So Dana, to me, that's a January.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I guess if maybe if you can also come in January with some of those recommendations around, we might as well start that discussion.
Okay.
Because we certainly can't make a final decision until we understand that. And I think we've all talked. I know that they have a general host family identification process, but I'd like to see, I think, a little bit more specifics about how it would work for Dover-Sherborn.
And we would tailor that. The marketing and the recruitment of host families is something that we would tailor.
Okay. But if they have anything specific, I think that would, I mean, any guidance on that would be Dover-Sherborn specific as opposed to any school USA.
Right.
That I think that would be also helpful in the
And
discussion.
in light of, you did the Survey Monkey, didn't you? Somewhere there was a question about would you host a student?
People would be interested.
Yes,
What
that
was
was
the-
last fall.
Right, and include that response in that data, so we have.
So do they usually do recruit families first and then you go and fill spots? Or?
Yeah, which
It's
comes
all-
first, the chicken or the egg?
It's all simultaneously. They'll recruit host families, they'll put us in for acceptance of international students. Certainly couldn't accept any international students unless we had host families. So it's a comprehensive process that happens all at once.
And the other
Just
thing
comes around.
is, how does this affect AFS for that school year?
And I've had those conversations with Beth Benjamin.
Right, so,
We'll
but when we
continue.
go down that path in the presentation.
You're talking about as
let's
part
make
of
sure we cover that,
January's
because-
discussion.
Right,
Yeah,
sure.
the community will want to know,
Absolutely.
Right?
or someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So any other questions about the international students in January?
No, congratulations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if you could come with some of your recommendations,
Yes.
an ideal number of students that you would do for the first pass, would it be a semester or a full year? Because obviously you know much more about the program than we do, and then we can take the conversation from that.
I also wanted to celebrate the professional development day yesterday. We actually had our lunch with John Doria where we talked about creating a culture of learning. It was attended by the entire staff. In the afternoon here at the region, we had technology workshops facilitated by DS teachers. Darren Buck, Marissa Bashon, Tina Longstreet, Adam Wiskowski, Lori Allighieri, Anna Hurley, Joseph Calpano, Laura Mullen, Sandra Samarco, and Diane Papatopoulos. Amazing what was accomplished in those 2 sessions yesterday afternoon for our educators, 6 through 12. I was just so jazzed by what was shared about how our educators are integrating the technology. How do we support the bring your own device? How do we use a Chromebook? What's an iPad app do? How does that help me? How do we use Aspen? Google Apps. I mean, it was just amazing, and it's a tribute to the staff we have here that was able to have facilitated by our headmasters and the director of technology, Anthony Taco, and Diane Papatopoulos is the K-12 technology integrator. So it was really cool. It was one of those days where you just start the day, and next thing you know, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But it's so energizing. So thank you very much for that.
And thank you, Karen, for organizing that. It's an enormous amount of work to move 200 people around multiple campuses and make sure the day is meaningful and purposeful. It's been months of work for Karen and her team, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Job well done.
It was a great job, Karen.
All right.
Ms. Teague?
Yeah, anything on fiscal
I think
15?
we know what we're here to talk
Your retirement party?
Almost.
Were we supposed to do the bond thing early?
No, that's what we're going to do next. But is there anything on fiscal 15 that you want to draw our attention to?
Not at this point. My preliminary review on healthcare is pretty positive at this point. We're basically holding we're at budget and we haven't used the 9 placeholders as of this date. So that's pretty positive for us.
Okay, so we're going to go out of order a little bit because we have a guest with us we're going to talk about the bond refunding opportunity in front of us so that we can allow our guests, because as much as she loves our school district, she probably doesn't want to spend multiple hours listening about next year's budget. Okay, Steve.
So sure, Margaret McLean, we welcome you to the Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee. Margaret is Vice President with Unibank and is here to discuss the bond refunding item that was put in your packet last month for informational purposes. And Margaret is here tonight to field questions. And maybe, Margaret, you can provide maybe just a general overview. I know we also have a handout that Chris
Yes, that's the recent number. So the bonds we did back in 2005 are coming up on what's called the current call, meaning the bonds from the 2016 through 2025 are eligible to be refunded, almost like when you refinance your mortgage, you turn them in for a lower rate. So that is coming up as of this May. Our plan is to sell bonds. We can sell bonds up to as early as 90 days before we want to pay off the bonds, the old bonds. So our plan is to sell bonds at the beginning of February. Hopefully the market will hold and we will realize some savings, substantial savings. Actually, if you look at the numbers that Chris had handed out, these schedules, I ran these today, and there's not much of a change from when I originally ran them back in October. Budgetary savings over the next 10 years, if you look at page 2, the second to last column where it says savings, that number at the bottom is $1,090,000, and that's over the next 10 years, over the life of the bonds. You know, obviously...
Margaret, you were very conservative even with your...
Yeah, I'll be getting to that.
Okay.
Obviously, you know, the market's going to change between now and the beginning of February. My numbers, I always run conservative numbers. So if you look at page 4, where you look at the coupons and the yields I've actually based are 40 basis points higher than the yields of it today. So I build in a what-if factor. So this is worst case scenario, and it still works, and it works well because it produces, you know, about 11% net present value savings, which is great. So the plan is to move forward and do the refunding in February. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but basically when you did the bonds back in 2005, you had to, basically every year going forward, you have to provide updated financial information to the market, which is due at the end of March every year. So that information is the same information we use to produce the document to do the refunding issue. So we're moving along like we normally do anyways. We're just a little bit ahead of schedule. So at this point, we're just waiting to see what's going on. We're putting the document together like we normally do, and we're watching the market. So if things continue to go the way they are, rates are still low, we're going to move forward with it. The only thing that needs to happen is a vote of the school committee to authorize the district to move forward with doing the refunding. You can take that at any time. I sent you that vote to take, if they want to take it the next school committee meeting, that's fine. Or if they want to just wait and go forward with the bond issue, and then just when they award the bonds, they can wrap that vote into that vote at the same time. It's whatever you guys choose to do. So this is where we're at right now. You know, every couple of weeks I will update it to see where it's at. If there's something substantial that happens and the market goes crazy, then obviously I'm going to run it sooner rather than later. But for now, the plan is to stay the course, to go forward with this in February. So if you have any questions about it?
Or do we incur any costs if we don't end up doing it? Let's just say the market goes wacky and
so
it's not worth calling.
No, because like I said, we have to update that document anyways. So there's the normal fee associated with that, but there's nothing else. If by chance, you know, we have to get a rating on it. So we're rated AAA by Standard & Poor's. So if we go to them and say, okay, we want a rating, and let's say, you know, we're ready to sell, and like 2 days before the sale date, something happens, then you incur the cost. But you know,
how much the rating agencies?
It depends. It varies, and it depends on mostly the size of the issue.
So we don't have to spend money for the rating agency till like
no,
February
and all of that is
1st
built into
in
the cost of the bond. So obviously, typically when you do a bond issue, you anticipate having the issuance costs associated with it, so you budget for it. When you do a refunding, it's because you're taking advantage of the low rates. You obviously can't budget for that, but you never know what's going to happen. You have the ability to roll those costs into the bond issue, and they are included in this. So that $1,090,000 savings is inclusive of the issuance cost as well.
And that's on page 1.
Yeah, and that's
Is
an
that the
estimated
first
number.
2 lines
Exactly, yep.
are in effect the refinancing costs?
Yep.
Closing costs.
Exactly. And that includes,
Bought a house before.
everything. That's your bond counsel fee, your rating agency fee, your underwriter's fee, our fee as your financial advisor, and the printer.
And then, is it the yield on page 4?
Mm-hmm.
It's the 2 of those numbers that are out to 17 digits at the bottom, the 2.3% or the 2.25?
The 2.25 is what they call the TIC, the true interest cost. That's what bonds are awarded based on. So that is an average of all the coupon and the yield and all of that.
So that's the number that has the 40 basis points.
No, the 40 basis points are in the yield itself of about. So yes, that TIC is probably still high. But if you know, so today's yield on it for 2016, was a 0.37, and I just added 40 basis points to it.
Okay, so the 40 basis points is kind of spread right now in
each of those
Each
yields.
year. So I've added every year. I've added 40 basis points.
of the schedule that's by bond.
Yes.
Right.
So it would be the 10-year right now for a AAA for Massachusetts is more closer to 2.2% then?
Probably closer to 2.
Okay.
Any other questions on the numbers? It seems like a no-brainer to me.
I don't know if we included the vote.
You don't have
we don't have it in our
You don't have to do it tonight.
Okay.
You can put it on
On
the
the
January
January
meeting and do
agenda.
it then. And just-
So we would vote to move forward with the process.
Exactly.
And then when we actually have to fund them, there's a particular date, right? It was Wednesday, the 5th of February. There was a particular
I think I
date.
tentatively have you selling on that, February 4th. So then you would have to vote, you would have to meet again after that, once we sell, to basically vote to award it to the lowest bidder at that point, and then the documents would have to be signed.
What was that date, Margaret? Wasn't it the 5th?
The 4th of the,
I think it was,
I have the 4th
the
of my.
4th was the Wednesday, which is
Okay.
why we thought of meeting on the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Because that
So,
Tuesday
yeah,
night
so
is
we
the
can work out the
DSCF
exact
thing in
dates,
here.
Chris, once I know.
So we have to
once-
move our meeting that week.
The other thing I want to point out, so if by chance, next month you take the vote to award it and the market goes crazy, just because you take, and let's say in 6 months, things go back again, that vote is still effective.
Okay,
So you don't have to retake that vote.
great.
That's basically is out there until either you use it or you don't use it.
Who actually makes the final decision to say, okay, we are going to market that? If there was an adverse change in rates?
I would probably discuss with Chris and Jim.
All right.
And they would let.
Because you guys aren't going to play, you're not going to play a week-to-week game. You're not going to say, oh, it looks better the week of February. Versus,
It also hinges, I mean, we're waiting on having your final 2014 audit because we want to have that as part of the document. And I believe you're voting on that next month.
yes.
Okay. So we can't really do anything at this point until I mean, we could, but it would look better if you had the 2014 final audit. By the time that's all done with everything and it's just gathering information from the district and the 2 towns, we're probably looking at really the earliest doing it this February. And then that will fall within the 90 days of
Right.
the May 15th date.
And nothing's gone on in the way rating agencies look at our type of school district
No.
in the last recent
Nope.
years, no change in their approach to AAA status.
No, I mean, if anything, Standard & Poor's has kind of revised their criteria, not for districts, for towns. And if anything, it's been more favorable than negative. But you're already at the highest that you can be, so.
No, I was more in the, if they started grading on a harder curve, would there be any risk?
Yeah, at this point, no. They haven't changed their philosophy as far
So
as.
no
district
discussion
goes.
about unfunded liabilities or things of that nature?
No,
More-
they're starting to look, they're looking at obviously pensions and OPEB. And it's one of the things they ask is, how are you addressing the issue? So, and that's something too that we disclose in your document and it's also in your audit, so they do have current information on it. And then we follow up with rating call when we do the rating, and it's something that, again, Chris and Jim will be discussing with them.
I was going to ask, do any of you guys have any questions?
I just have a tiny question. So if all goes well and you do refinance this bond, which budget would it be reflected in?
16. It would be 16, and it has to be used to reduce the capital or the debt assessment. It can't be used for any other purpose.
So the numbers that are in the draft budget, which I know we haven't gotten
Right.
to yet, but they would not take into account any of these potential savings?
No.
Am
No.
I right?
Correct.
Okay.
Isn't?
Okay, thank you.
No, it is
not.
not.
We reference it as a.
Okay,
No,
it's
we
not
didn't
baked.
bake it.
Okay,
No.
I misunderstood.
We don't know what they
So-
were
I was
doing.
misunderstood the way it was worded then.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't make that change to February.
Right,
But you'd know more in February, you'd be able to make adjustments before the final. budget.
absolutely.
Correct.
So if these bonds are issued on a debt excluded basis, or on a, whatever the phrase is, we're from 2.5, does that actually physically change what the towns can then assess?
Yes, because they have to assess by the actual debt service.
Right.
So if you're reducing the debt service, then the debt exclusion will be reduced by whatever,
Your levy will
So
come
there's
down.
real,
Right, so it's positive.
so, well, the levy comes down,
Michael, are you
The
talking
expenses
about
go down.
if the warrant was for a certain amount of money and now it's for less than that, do we need a new warrant?
no, not a new warrant, but before any of the committees go off and anticipate these savings, the only savings we'll be seeing is on the tax bill of the residents. If
Yeah.
the taxing authority
Right.
goes away, it doesn't become repurposable cash flow for any other budget, any other debt
Yeah,
service.
right.
I'm curious, what did you say in your report about us meeting our OPEB obligation?
I have to look at it, I don't know what it is off the top of
We-
my head.
that'll be addressed in the FY 14 financials that is going to be given to the school committee in January. And we are also due for an update to the actuarial estimate, which will probably start in March to be available at the end of the fiscal year.
So the accountants aren't going to show up to a meeting as they did a couple of years ago?
They are. In January.
In January. Yep.
Because we had change in auditors, so.
Right, so they weren't ready for
inevitably,
this
the
meeting.
audit takes a little bit longer and so a bit more painful, right?
So, we're gonna take the motion in January,
Right.
and are we going to tonight officially agree to move February's meeting?
That would make sense, yes. Right, so right now, we are on for Tuesday, February 3rd. And the question on the table is, should we move to Thursday, February 5th, so that we can do both our meeting and be able to approve a refinancing? Is there any reason why we couldn't do that?
And am I correct that we also have a meeting on February 11th?
Yes, that's one with both of the finance committees, the all hands on deck meeting. All right. Well, sounds like, I don't know, any problems with Thursday the 5th? All right, then let's move it. One meeting is always better than two. Any other questions for Margaret from the finance group? Groups? All right.
Thank you for being here,
Thank you so much, Margaret.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Yeah, don't offer though.
Love the good news.
Exactly. Let's hold tight on the rates. Come on, rates.
That's right.
All right.
Just 2 more months to go.
Exactly. All right. Excellent. So we moved that. So now we'll head back up to the top. Do you want to do the advisory committee on extra duties?
Sure. Love to. You ready for it?
I'm always ready for that.
Claire, are you ready for it?
I think so.
There's my resident expert fact checker.
God, I didn't realize that I was.
You are. So, update number 2 in your packet, dated November 24th, provides a bit of a recap on what this committee is more fluent on maybe than our other 2 school committees. No disrespect for our other 2 school committees, but the whole notion of extra compensatory duties and responsibilities has been a bit foreign to those committees. So at the Sherborn School Committee a couple weeks ago, we spent a good deal of time talking a little bit about the ACED, the Advisory Committee on Extra Duties. We've named the individuals in the memo. We talked a little bit about the ratio. Everything on the, as you folks well know, everything is assigned a ratio value. The ratio value went up by 1.6%. In this, the first year of the contract, it will go up by 1.6% in each of the remaining 2 years of the contract. And as this committee knows all too well, it is exactly at this time of year, usually at this exact meeting, when you would typically have before you some recommendations on different folks that have brought forward different considerations. So I'm the advisor to this club, I want this ratio to go up, down, or whatever it is. The ACED is just, it's a really thoughtful group. They've met several times. It took a lot to kind of get them educated a little bit around the history of what was discussed in the contract, which brought us to the current point, looking at Appendix C, a little bit of what's happened historically with the Regional School Committee every year, explaining a little bit about why every year the Regional School Committee seems a little bit unable to move as much as it may want to on some of these particular items, because it always hits right on the dawn of our budget season. So this group's been very good about listening. We actually went through every line of the budget in each of our budgets that relates anything to extra comp. So they looked at the budget for the region, the budget for Dover, the budget for Sherborn, and they did a lot of homework on this. So you'll recall last month we talked about the nurse leader position, school nurse leader. We talked a little bit about how if this year's budget, the fiscal year 15's budget, had been built with every single advisorship and everything running in it, there would have been like another $9,200 worth of stipends in there, but there were a number of positions that were vacant. So what this great group did, ACD, they met several times. They met particularly, I think, November 13th, is when they really made some decisions. They looked at, as they would every year, they looked at a whole battery of proposals. The value on that whole battery was about $33,000 worth of recommendations. That means there were a number of faculty members in our school system, predominantly at the region, who are either serve as an advisor for a particular group and they sought more money for that position for one reason or another, or they've been advising a group for no compensation and they asked for a certain ratio assignment for that. About $33,000 worth of requests. The ACED group knew from its direction from last month from the regional school committee that about $9,200 had everything run. That's what the school committee could have embraced. So they sought to look at that list. They looked at the 33,000, and they, as you can see on the memo, they looked at every single position, every request, and they made a recommendation on every single one that was put before them. And you can see the determination on every single request. Unlike previous years, every person who requested something received a letter back from the central office, and it said, you know, we thoughtfully considered your request, and one of a few things is happening with your request. Either the ACED group, the ACD, is going to recommend a partial or full funding of the position to the regional school committee, or the ACED is going to defer your particular request until its next round, or in a couple instances, the ACED really felt as if the request was really worthy of maybe incorporation into a DSEF grant. DSEF wants cutting-edge, innovative type programming and grant writing. So in particular, there were two that were recommended to be incorporated into a DSEF grant. One is funding for D1A, Day 1A here at the middle school, which is an excellent part of our transition program for students coming into the middle school, both matriculating and new students to our system. And the ACD really felt like that is such an incredible part of middle school and something that's really pretty innovative. So we thought it best to recommend that the author of that request potentially go through a DSEF grant. And the second was advanced by Keith Kaplan to form a Harvard-style Model UN group. And that too, the ACD felt like that is something that, you know, DSEF would probably welcome a grant around that. So out of all 33,000, there were only a couple that were recommended for DSEF, a few that you can see in the memo that were recommended for funding. And what we did as a visual exhibit for you, Cheryl pulled this together today, and we thank Mrs. Graham for her suggestion to do this. It's really helpful, and I think Claire raises a very good point that if we don't sort of visually capture this, it could really spin.
It gets lost in the text.
It gets lost.
And how do you translate that to the actual appendix in the contract?
Sure.
Somebody's going to know what it is.
So we'll let these circulate. Yep. So what? It's okay, they can go to the audience.
No,
Thanks, Carol. Cheryl maintains a huge Excel spreadsheet in every extracurricular position. It falls into one of three buckets: teaching and learning, extracurricular, and then the teaching, learning, extracurricular, or athletic. Those are our three-bucket determinations. This encapsulates actions that have been taken thus far with respect to items appearing in Appendix C. The first one is the school nurse leader. You'll notice there's an asterisk next to it because the funding for the school nurse leader position was partially grant funded. You'll remember this from last month, and there was a small piece of that was attached back to each salary line, $1,200 for each district. You'll then notice all of the items appearing in black are all recommendations based on their old ratio and what the ACD recommends. And essentially what ACD did is they reassigned those 6.5 ratio points. So they took the 6.5 appearing in red at the bottom that were vacant, and they reassigned them to requests that were vetted by them. They did exactly what they were asked to do, They didn't exceed a penny beyond. They're very proud of the fact that there's finally kind of an opportunity and a mechanism to make this work better. So thank you, Claire, for the recommendation today. And all Cheryl had to do was literally from this huge spreadsheet of everything,
From
cut and paste.
From contract negotiations, she has that.
Yep. And so the memo spells out here that the ACD group committee seeks the final approval of the regional school committee to be able to award these 6.5 ratio points to the named individuals. And those other individuals who were either deferred or recommended for DSEF or some other mechanism of funding will go about seek that funding. So that's sort of updates on 2. Sorry, it's kind of elongated, but it's important.
Any questions on the process or specifics?
So, Steve, just the I just want to hear, not necessarily disagree with, the rationale for raising the team leader ratio?
Sure. Scott, do you mind?
It brings them on par with the curriculum leaders and the team leaders.
Curriculum leaders at the elementary level?
At the middle school level.
Okay.
And our team leaders over the past few years, their responsibilities have increased for 504 meetings, and a number of parent interactions, and, organizing trips, and so forth.
That was actually, you'll recall that for this year, that ratio was increased by the same amount for last year in a one-time configuration. And so we knew that the group would come back and request the same for this year. Because remember that last year was a one-time opportunity. So that, I think it's important in the mindset also to think of what bucket that falls into. So it's easy when you talk about extracurricular to think about extra compensatory positions. Remember, we have the teaching and learning bucket, that's department chairs, curriculum leaders, curriculum supervisors, mentors, all of those folks. Extracurriculars, a whole nother bucket. Athletics is a third bucket. So we tried very hard to make sure that we weren't sort of commingling the different ideas. One could say, well, I really would want that, but I really would like to see X, Y, and Z extracurricular positions. These are positions that are already baked into the Appendix C, and in fact, they're already in Appendix C as they apply to the elementary schools as well.
Right. Well, that's why when Scott said curriculum, that to me is the elementary name. That's what I said. So I guess my concern or my statement is just we're baking in, as you say, this additional ratio percentage plus the 1.6 and the contracted increases for these team leaders for that position for the next 2 years of this contract. Because we're not really going to readjust a ratio going down.
Well, it's interesting. The ACED groups, interesting enough, asked at our last meeting, and both Mr. Smith and Mr. Kell sit on the committee, obviously. They asked, when will we get to the work of really looking at what is assigned what within Appendix C? I mean, they really do want to take a very hard look, which was their charge, was to say, is really this particular advisorship, when it may have come online at 4 ratio points 15 years ago, is that really worthy of 4 ratio points, or is that something, maybe it's now, it should be at 5, or maybe it should be at 3. Ultimately, the group at its November 13th meeting said, it's kind of like reupholstering the plane seats mid-flight, because right now we have things that seem always to be run. You either have people that are coaching positions, so it's like, if Claire, you're the SAT advisor, it would be like saying, Claire, thanks so much for all the work, but we've decided that your ratio is now not 3, it's 2. Thanks for the work though this year.
Right.
So the group decided that it's best to scrub the whole list in whatever way they think they can or should. At the end of the school year, when there are no coaching positions running, there are no advisorships running, it's like it's all hands on deck, kind of, and no one's in a safe harbor because their positions.
So that will be communicated to the teachers and then come back to us.
Yes.
But what is you? But for right now, for 2015, 2016, these 4.25s would go back to 4.0s. and the process would have to happen again,
No.
right?
No, that's why
This-
I'm
okay.
asking the
Yeah.
question, Dana.
Oh, okay.
Because once we make that change, it's in the contract until,
The next
it
time
used
it's
to be
open.
forever, but now we've got this lovely
Group.
mechanism of making a change.
Okay,
The likelihood of changing one item on its own is probably very slim, but an overall review of all the ratios, even if it were just in a particular bucket, so whether it was all the teaching and learning things in one go, is an easier manipulation than,
so
say, the one individual, your ratio is going from
Right.
4.2 to
Right.
so
3.8.
the only way really then to keep this appendix level would be is if all of those items in red actually went to 0. Because right now, this,
They are,
We're not funding them.
I know they're not being funded, but they're still in Appendix C at those levels.
Right,
So-
no, so they stay in the level as long as, they stay in the appendix as long as there's agreement between the union and the teachers that it stays there, and because we might fill it down the road.
Right, okay, but so now I'm really confused, because I thought we were for 1 year taking the 6.5 that weren't being used and giving them to somebody else.
We're taking the money,
Right,
not the
Yeah, we
ratio.
had those positions.
Right,
that
but,
were-
but what Jamie's saying
but-
is technically next year we might actually have 13, because
Right.
what if somebody.
What if all of those
fills out-
No,
6.5
because
come
we
back?
only budget
Right.
the $100,000, and the $100,000 can only go across so
So-
many spots.
But
So
if
to
you,
be more-
so
So
if you,
next year, if they wanted to add, or now, thinking about it, if the extra comp committee in the next couple of months decides, well, next year we want mock trial advisor and energy and
Right.
newspaper to come back,
correct.
they're gonna have to come to the superintendent and to us to say, we're gonna have to raise that line in the budget by $9,000.
Or defund.
Or
other
Or
positions.
defund those other
Correct.
things.
So along those lines,
Okay,
So I would hope that if there are extracurricular activities because of the enrollment bubble, and we think we're going to need more advisors, that we're hearing from the administrators, gee, we need an extra $10,000.
that it's in the fiscal 16 budget,
so,
so we're about to look at.
so to be kind of tangible, did a position and an activity like having a newspaper go away because it lacked a teacher willing to be the advisor, it lacked student interest, it just seems like some activities have longer term impacts or are more connected than some of the others. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have activities that are stress relievers and ways to get kids active or whatever, but when you see something like that go away, you wonder what's the component of our activity strategy that pushes kids to do new things. And so not to put you on the spot on a newspaper.
Yeah, on the high school newspaper,
Taking up the banner
we
for
certainly have some
previous
students who are interested, and we've got a small handful of students who are, have been working with a couple of teachers who are just doing this without accepting a stipend because they feel like the amount of work that they're really just kind of helping facilitate, not really being the full-fledged. Honestly, I don't think right now we have a large enough cadre of students interested in the school newspaper. Doesn't mean we won't in the future.
Yeah.
But right now we do not.
So the ACD group said, they were so appreciative of the fact that the regional school committee recognized that this $9,200 could be sort of rebranded, and they knew they had $33,000 to look at. They did that hard work with their own colleagues going back and saying, we'd like to buy, why don't you look at this buy? When people were deferred to category 2, they were deferred because the ACD group does, looking forward, they do look forward to the opportunity of coming before the regional school committee and asking for that line to be exactly as Claire indicated, to be increased. We're not ready to put a dollar value on that yet because that's sort of literally their next meeting will be that. They've done a really good job of bringing themselves up. We had to sort of go through Budget 101, Contract 101, and bring all these folks who weren't part of any of this up to speed. So they've done a lot of homework, a lot of legwork. We got the school nurse leader position solidified with some nice grant funding. This is sort of priority 1, and we'll be looking at priority 2 after the next meeting. So you can anticipate there'll be some request. I can't put a dollar value to it at this very moment, but we'll meet in the next couple of weeks. That'll be part of what we do as probably a budget, as one of our iterations of our budget.
So, did, for the ones that got kicked over to DSEF, has anyone spoken to DSEF about this? Like before it was decided that DSEF might like to fund it?
So I sit on the board for DSEF, and the DSEF board has had a number of discussions around funding and ratios and the funding of positions, that kind of thing. There's really only an appetite to do that in the interest of full disclosure. I mean, DSEF is very clear. If it's really embedded in something that's cutting edge and innovative. So DSEF does not want to become the, oh, it wasn't funded here, kick it here. That's not really, so they, and in fact, I had coffee with Eric Burt early last week, and we sat and we chatted, and he said that, Steve, that's what we're a little concerned about as a board. We don't want to become, oh, it doesn't fit within the operating budget, so therefore, that's kind of what happened with the, in their perception with the technology over time. That's why the stance was taken, you know, we don't want to, we don't.
So have we specifically asked them then about these 3 items?
They
Because
would,
all
because
3 of them are, I mean, not as a formal request, but have we informally, because all 3 of them are things that I would hate for them not to be funded just because we were making the assumption that DSEF could pick it up.
Right.
And
What's
then
the
they don't.
timing of their decision?
So the timing, DSEF grants are due this Friday, December 5th.
But have we had any
Well,
informal
sorry, next
discussions
Friday.
with them of, you know?
Not yet, I wouldn't.
So they have no idea that we're thinking that they're funding
No, they
robotics
do.
team?
They just don't know the specific items yet because it was the obligation.
But I mean, that's my question, like, they don't know that we have on, like, have they seen this document that says robotics team, we're hoping the SEF
No,
will
that's
fund
not
it?
the-
So I'm kind of uncomfortable with this then. Okay.
But
But we
we
also-
only have the X number of dollars in that line item, and this committee is saying,
Right, but would
They
I
have
put
to
it for the
prioritize.
.25? I mean, it's very
Right.
hard for me to know, do I want to put the extra .25 on the team leaders? I think I do, because it sounds like they are certainly more than earning, you know, the extra. But I have no, but that's on the assumption that DSEF is funding Model UN robotics and D1A. It's possible that if DSEF says this isn't what I want, I might say, well, then if I only have this much money or these many points, I'd rather put it to this.
So let's play if then, right? So if that happens, and it's possible, I mean, there's also, Carolyn's, that point of who syncs up first. I mean, we have
Right.
to bring things to the regional school committee. There are other funding sources beyond DSEF as well. So we have particular, I have a family, for instance, that's also willing to absolutely help finance a robotics team if that's, so.
I guess my point is more, well, obviously at some point we have to take a vote without knowing all the pieces, and you have to
Right.
sort of make a decision on A before you go to B. It just, I would hope that we could have some informal discussions about, you know, what is the likelihood of things getting
And
funded.
they function as a board, so I mean, they'll take
Yeah.
all the grants under advisement. Amy knows, she sits on the board. They'll meet, they have liaisons who will come into the buildings and they'll talk to the headmasters about the viability and the sustainability of all grants. So we're quite a while away from what would be any determination on a DSEF.
But I think, my understanding is if the building leaders are coming to the DSEF board or any of the parent boards, with those being the priorities, there tends to be a fair amount of respect between the boards to the building leaders to say, if this is your priority, then, you know,
consider it.
well, there's usually, I mean, obviously there's no guarantee, but it's
Right,
not just a shot in the dark.
okay.
Okay.
Oh, I would say that's absolutely fair, but the caveat to that is that's a 1-year fix.
Right.
So there's,
Right.
it always comes back to the school committee.
Well, here we are again.
You
You know, we do this every year. I'm really grateful for the ACD's work. I like the fact that it seems crisper and cleaner and that there's actually a mission. This is good news, right? I don't think this is the school committee's responsibility. I think our responsibility is to say, here's $100 grand for extracurricular activities. Do what you want. It may also be our responsibility within the terms of the contract to decide that should we offer Green Team, it's worth a 0.5. And should we offer extracurricular, offer mock trial? I really, not only do I think it shouldn't be our responsibility, I think it should be John's and yours and whoever else should be involved, responsibility to decide whether mock trial happens. I don't think it is our responsibility. I floated this, I think, back channel at the end of last year, that I think what we do here, I think what we are contractually obligated to do here is to make a menu, and then to have you guys decide what you're actually serving. We'll tell you how much you can spend on food, and we'll tell you the kinds of things that we think are on that menu. We will not tell you what you should actually put on the table. And I don't see anything in the contract that says we can't do that.
We have to approve the ratios. So
right.
They're coming to us to say, approve these ratios or not. And so then we have a discussion
and we can do that. But we
I
should not be in the position of saying this $9,000 doesn't belong here, it does belong here. That's somebody else's
But if
decision.
they're going to come back and recommend, and I don't know what the specifics are in the budget, for increasing spending in this area, we kind of should know what's pushing the need to do that. And somehow we're going to have to get to this type of work, either
at a much less fine-grained level. And I don't think we ever should be on this fine-grained level. I just don't think, we don't have the competence to make that decision.
It's the way our contract is structured.
I know, and I think it is.
But I also think it is part of our, it's like, and to me, it's like, I don't just approve a budget without looking at the line items. In the same way that I'm not going to just approve a blanket category without approving line. And I think the school committee does have a role in more actively or less actively supporting certain things on this list which we feel would push the school in a certain direction.
The line item is extracurricular activities, and that we should be approving, and we should be saying, here's how much we're willing to spend on it. Go spend it the way that you think it should.
But that's not how our appendix works.
And I also don't want it to work that way. I think we should be more involved in the details.
So we had our discussion about what's on here.
Right.
Should we see where we are on the night? Because in my mind, Steve, we can separate the two votes tonight because we haven't even gotten to the other part of your no. And so I will make a motion to approve the suggested $9,219.28 as detailed on the listing.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any more discussion?
I didn't understand the motion, because this money is already budgeted in some way or another, right? We're just
approve the
shifting
new
it.
ratios.
Okay, that's a different motion, right?
Sorry, you're right.
Okay.
Right.
You're right.
So, second.
Second that
Second
one.
that.
So the only point of discussion I want to make, and then I will stop talking about this, is I really do hope that at the end of the year, when you're not sort of retroactively, pushing people, telling people they get less money after they do all the work, at the end of the year, I would really love a wholesale review of all of this stuff. And think about what are the activities that we want to make sure these schools are offering, and therefore we want to incentivize teachers to, I think the teachers do anyway, but, to compensate them for it. Versus what are the ones that may have been put in 15 years ago and nobody has just had the time to look at it yet.
Right.
So.
But that's what the ASED's going to be doing next month, in May, in June.
At the end of the school year. We have to kind of do it when there's no one in the.
Well, and
to say to that committee that, we really appreciate this work. This is hard work, a lot of detailed work that a lot of people have been waiting a long time to be able.
This has current year impact.
Correct.
Their wholesale review is really an FY16.
Well, that was going to be my only corollary. Is there money? Is there sufficient money in the budget to cover anything that is only a one-time event from DSCF or
no? No. So the budget at the moment takes what's fiscal 15, blows it out by the 1.6% by the ratio for now. And so for it's our first. There are going to be other things. Quite honestly, because the ACE, I really like the name, the They just got together right before Thanksgiving and finished this work because they knew you needed it for this meeting.
Right.
They're anxious to get together and look at, sort of the priority 2 items. So that will be forthcoming.
Okay. As long as it's early enough
Oh,
to
yeah.
be incorporated into the fiscal 16 discussion, otherwise it's going to be too late for it.
No, we will.
Basically have it till March.
Well,
I'm not saying you want to go there.
We'll get together in the next 2 weeks.
Right, okay,
before the
perfect.
holiday vacation.
I will only add here, and I'll be quiet, that the changes in ratio that we're being asked to vote on were not decided based on the merit of the request exactly. They're really decided based on, here's how much money we have available, and we'll ratchet up some of these worthy requests until we run out of this money.
I don't know,
So
they
did I-
might have decided.
Well, it was limited by the amount of money.
David,
that was-
Limited by that.
$219.
Well, exactly, it was limited by that amount of money. No, I don't mean that any of them are
Right, but you
below
could
it.
have not done the team leaders, and you could have said
Correct.
robotics was the most important thing to
Correct.
happen.
Right.
I'm doing robotics.
Right, but in the end, the green team might have gotten 1 instead of 0.5, but there wasn't the extra 0.5 to give.
My point being that the ratios, therefore, are not really rational decisions. They are expeditious decisions, but they're not rational.
Oh, no, they're rational within the constraints of what we had.
Okay, I think we've had, yes. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion to approve the allocation that's in the memo here? All in favor? Opposed? 5-1.
On to the next one.
All right.
Ready?
Yes.
This is ACED Part 2. So,
Don't put your men all away, just.
yeah, this is why this group's so important. There's an effort underway and a thinking right now of looking at what would be our first ever department chair position. We think of department chairs as a high school born element. And the proposal before you, which went also before the Sherborn School Committee a couple weeks ago, will go before Dover 2 weeks from now, because it is truly baked into your fiscal 16 model, is to essentially look at a fine arts department chair, not what was sort of toyed with a little bit around fine arts director, but calling this a fine arts department chair. Looking at the role of the arts, both visual and performing, in our 2 member communities and our 3 school districts, I think it's abundantly evident to those of you who have kids who are either in the arts program or have been or hope to be, that there is a very real lack of adhesion among the 3 committees, among the 3 school districts around the arts. There's no one who's really championing this cause for all 3 school districts. So we have at the region, at the high school at the moment, we have what's called an LFTA, Living Fine and Technical Arts Department Chair. That person in that role, forgetting who it is for a moment, the person who fills that department chair role oversees a department of technology, some engineering, some foods classes, fine arts, including both visual and performing. It's an interesting arrangement of courses, arguably over which the person, as qualified as he may be in his area, as anyone may be in a given content area, probably lacks the expertise in some of those other areas. It's not like being math chair, English chair, history chair. What this recalibration, this reconfiguration seeks to do is say, let's have a Dover-Sherborn Fine Arts Department chair. This person has an overarching role across 3 school districts. We live within the 4 walls of a contract, so when you look at a position like that, you need to say, okay, we want this person to have an evaluative role. The only person in our contract that has an evaluative role in the teacher that contributes to evaluation is a department chair. They're the only person, curriculum supervisor. So you're kind of backing away.
Our current, sorry to interrupt,
Sure.
but our current person in that department role has, correct?
Absolutely, yes. So that's alive and well and happening as it should be at the high school. But as we looked at this over the past few weeks, it went before ACD. We definitely talked about it as a cabinet of 20 cabinet members. We've talked about this for over a month. At our meetings, we talked offline about it, online about it. There's a real need for this, and it's not just, I wouldn't want for any school committee member of any of our 16 to think, well, this just means you have somebody else helping with evaluations. So what we did is we actually attached a draft job description. This is a super draft job description. This helps to outline just some of what a department chair would do in this area, K through 12. Now at the moment, at each elementary school, at Chickering for instance, we employ 1.8 performing arts teachers, and we employ 1.0 FTE visual arts teacher. At Pine Hill Elementary School, we have a 0.8 visual arts teacher, and we have a 1.0 music teacher. At the region, we have a number of people, okay, across the buildings. At the moment, you'll recall when Ida Pappas worked with us on chorus, she was a music teacher at Chickering. She was the gen music teacher who also was teaching chorus here at the region. So that was the beginning of some of that, the working across the districts. We also have articulated a curriculum across the 3 districts in the area of both fine and performing arts. It seems the most logical step instructionally to move in the direction of having someone who's specialized in the area of the arts, oftentimes the fine arts degree, who has the content area expertise to oversee this K through 12. The interesting part is that this would be the first ever time, really, the elementary schools would have kind of a piece of a department chair. So what we did is we looked at what we costed out, what a department chair is, what it costs the region. There's release time in a department chair schedule, and there's a stipend in that model. So ultimately, there's a cost of a department chair of about $24,000. About $16,000-ish of release time and about an $8,000 stipend. So we then said, forget which district for a minute, if there's a $24,000 cost for this, and if we believe in this position, how does it get apportioned? That becomes kind of a fundamental question. So the Sherborn School Committee conceptually loves the idea, agrees that, they were with it. There's a bit of a struggle on the financial benefit to the local, and at least from the Sherborn School Committee, the Dover School Committee hasn't seen this yet, about a $5,900 price tag, as you can see on the breakdown. They're struggling, and I think rightfully so, around saying, it's arguably, the operation's more complex at the region, you have more teachers at the region, maybe it's not a 50% allocation at the region and 25% to each elementary school, so the cost to them isn't maybe necessarily $5,900. The Sherborn School Committee asked administration to look at that, and I said, well, in all fairness to our 3 school committees, it needs to be presented in its form as it's currently articulated, as it was presented to the Sherborn School Committee. So we bring it before you this evening with the idea, now you may be thinking, what does that do to LFTA at the high school, right? If all of a sudden you have LFTA with 8 or 9, 10 teachers in it, and you pull out all the visual and performing arts teachers, what happens? Well, what we seek to do is have a technology and engineering department chair. That would be somebody who would oversee technology and engineering 612 at the region. We only have one other person in a similar position right now, that's Dara Johnson, as the health and wellness, what we call regional coordinator. It's really a department chair. It's a 6 through, Dara oversees health. She does evaluate, and she is evaluated. So there's that role, absolutely. So this would actually be the second similar regional position. It better focuses the instructional model because you have someone overseeing technology and engineering that's more concentrated in those areas, which arguably we don't pay enough attention to, maybe, some could argue, in terms of, really hyper-focusing on engineering, on STEM initiatives and whatnot system-wide. So to us, it makes a lot of sense to do this. You can see the cost breakdown of doing so, and the cost to the region of this is including your budget, just like the $5,900 cost of this is in the Sherborn School Committee's budget, and the $5,900 is in the Dover School Committee budget. This is also unofficially something that it would be very well received, I suspect, by FOPA, by the Friends of the Performing Arts, who have been sort of hot on our trail to move in this direction as well. So to Carolyn's point on talking about what moves the needle, what moves our system in terms of these are our students, they come from our two towns, they feed into our region, they're all our kids. We could do a better job around the arts and really pay it the homage it's due. And we think this helps to move in that direction. So, I'm just loaded.
Yes, Richard.
I think it's a terrific idea. I think Sherborn's probably right that it is more complex, more responsibilities being taken over by the region. I wouldn't have a problem if you found what you thought was a fair way to do it. My real question is, yes, this is an excellent idea, and it's an excellent idea for math too, and probably English and history and everything else. Is there any reason that the arts, I mean, I understand the idea that Living Fine Technical doesn't really make much sense as a pot. Other than that, should we be driving the arts in particular in this direction?
It's a great question, and it's interesting because 5, almost 6 years ago when I started, it was literally the music teachers in particular who first came and said, we feel a little bit like we're on these disparate islands here, and it makes a lot of sense for a 6th grade music teacher, or music teachers at the middle school to have a sense, please, of what the music experience looks like at the elementary schools. They hadn't been brought together to have that, so you'll remember, we articulated the curriculum. That's not like, the curriculum's not done and therefore it becomes a dust collector, it's dynamic. That group right now is moving into the assessment development. How do we really assess students in the arts? There's a lot more work to be done. And one thinking is, would that reside with the assistant superintendent? Well, that would require so much direct oversight of a group spanning 3 districts, and that's what I did, to get them kind of up and running. And then Karen has run with that to some extent, and we've also taken the fine arts, the visual arts folks, and we've begun to do that too. It could be precedent setting in the sense of saying, okay, is this something we want to look at? Like, would we want, when the enrollment goes down at the region, or before, or after, would we maybe want to look at more 6 through 12 department chair type positions? Maybe. It seems to be heading that direction with foreign language. We have a Spanish program at the elementary schools right now that, excuse me, Mike, that actually next year will be rolling in the third grade. So we'll have grades K1 and 2. We now have 2 teachers in 2 elementary schools teaching Spanish. Pretty soon it's going to look like, why aren't we connecting them up with the middle school?
So specific to that concept, I think we haven't really delved much into the technology and engineering regional coordinator, and I would be interested in hearing from Scott and or John. How do they see somebody taking this grade 6 to 12 approach? And I think that feeds into STEM, where they're driving that component that isn't really, I think, well constructed as we do have in our science and math part of STEM. How do they do that position having an impact? And the fact that it has to span 2 buildings.
I think that's what we need. We need someone that will have a vision for departments 6 through 12. Moving forward, it could ultimately be K through 12. That is something we're missing right at this moment.
And I would just add that, especially with our high school courses, we have a number of elective courses, but they really are just singletons. They're just real, and there isn't really a connected cohesion with 6 to 12. There really isn't a whole lot of interaction. They know one another, they chat, but there's no real connection. So I think it is something that we lack. And I do think it would be the right direction moving with some initiatives to have somebody that was in fact overseeing them, and that we also, we clearly would be included with that supervision evaluation, but looking at the curriculum so that when a student comes into the region, grade 6, that it's not just, okay, here's what I can do grades 6, 7, and 8, it's here's what I can do now through high school, leading into college. So we can really, I think, establish a much more robust program.
And I think that we're looking at computer science K-12, especially with the advent of code.org, which is happening next week in all of our schools, K-8. For me, that's that trajectory that we don't have alignment, and the 6 through 12 person can assist.
And I don't want to, I'm very supportive of this, the focus on the arts and the K-12 focus, but I think you, to some extent, have given short shrift on this proposal to the STEM component as a whole. And I think we have to be prepared, if we're as a committee supportive of this concept, to probably be willing to absorb more of the cost, because I see us getting more of the benefit.
No, it's,
No, the STEM is, this part is just ours.
Correct, but we're going to that position, they're going to be paid more and get .2 release time over the current circumstances.
Right, but that's entirely ours, that's not shared.
Only
the fine arts part is shared.
But the total amount of the allocation for us is increasing 5,800. And the current proposed assessment to each of our sister districts is close to 6,000. So I could see where, I don't want to negotiate against myself, but I do.
Right.
I can appreciate their position.
New position.
No, this technology and engineering position.
Right, it's a new position, but that money already.
It's already
It's already in our budget.
Other than the release.
Yeah, but I'm looking at
But our department head already.
Yeah, right now we're at 30,000, if I'm interpreting this chart. And coming out of this reorganization where we get the benefit, I think, or our students get the benefit of a K-12 arts perspective and a cohesive grade 6 to 12 STEM leader.
Right.
We, if I'm interpreting this right, we would pay $5,800 additional.
No, so can we go back to the current? So current position
and we're asking Dover and Sherborn to pay close to 6,000. So I'm just saying we have to be comfortable saying if we are supportive of this, when we come to a January meeting,
so
we may need to be prepared to agree to a different.
Sure. Position 2, it says no release time, but that's a curriculum leader. We have a department head at the high school who has
Under the proposed.
No, under current.
Under the current, because the other current position is the living fine at the middle school. That person sees this as position 2 at current.
Oh, right, okay.
That person is like Sandra Samarco, or whomever that person is.
Right. Oh, so we're not adding.
The real cost, the bubble goes up because you have another section of release time. You're providing release time for the person to do this work. That is a $16,000 cost that we're apportioning across districts. Arguably, we may need to look at how that's apportioned based on what we're hearing now, because the cost to the region of this is $5,800, and really the cost to each elementary school is $5,900. And that's where there's definitely some.
I feel like the elementary schools are getting, I don't know,
Two other concerns.
You know, I also want to be mindful of the time, because it's already 8:08. We still haven't gotten to our budget discussion.
But these are the types of initiatives
I know, I just want to make sure.
Are strategizing and
yes.
work hard.
Quick question. Are there licensure or certification requirements that will be unfamiliar to any of our current staff because now we're creating a K-12 position?
No, not for this. And that actually begs the interesting thing as well, because this came up with Sherborn School Committee, where the sense was, does this have the perception of, or does it sort of look and feel like an administrator type of position? It is not, as Claire knows, having just gone through the contract discussion. This is quite squarely in the teacher's contract. It actually allows some teachers who may want at some point to go into administration to, like I think a lot of our department chairs at some point may think to do, of dipping their toes a little bit in the water of what is it like to manage a department of people. But it does not pose a certification issue for anyone, and we've thought of who those people might be. It'd be open to anyone. Theoretically, you have to get comfortable with the idea that the department chair, the fine arts department chair of the region, could be one of our elementary teachers. You have to. It's a departure from the way we've done business, but you need to get comfortable with that because this is a position. It's not a regional. This is a teacher's contract. This is anyone in the teachers union could say, I'm qualified. In fact, we have some who are. They don't qualify at the elementary level to fill the role. It's very different.
So the finance chair, once upon a time, was an English teacher.
Right. And living finance was a arts teacher, no, technical teacher. So two other things. I think the technology, engineering, whatever we end up calling it, STEM, whatever, needs to be titled the department chair. That means we need to change wellness to department chair. I would say go down that road. That's what we treat them like. That's what we ask them to behave like. Ask the ACED to consider that.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they're the ones making that recommendation. And then the side issue is how we pay these people, where the benefits accrue, all those issues we have with shared positions. Being three separate legal entities.
That's a great observation.
And that's a whole other night's discussion.
It is. It's for those people, we have different people and different percentages of different people are charged differently. It's how the superintendent's charged back to the three districts and how the assistant superintendent, director of facilities, the director of food service. I think it's a really thoughtful exercise we're going through because this could be futuristically in terms of how we look at positions. This could be a little bit precedent setting in the sense of if we say the region is arguably larger no matter what you do, it's two buildings, it's always going to be bigger than either elementary school. It's going to be arguably on the face of it more complex because it is. So however the decision is made around the allocation, if in fact is a favorable move, you're right. I think, and that's to Dana's point earlier today. Do you want to jump in on that?
Oh yeah, I've asked for our next joint meeting that we look at all of those allocations because I feel like there's probably 18 different ways of allocation and that doesn't really make sense to me. It seems like we should have some basic cost accounting type of logic where it's by building, by whatever.
Student, by teacher, by town.
You want to go down that path?
Well, I think
we need an ACED.
I think that I think it makes more sense than every time we come up and say, oh, it should be 60, 20, 20. No, it should be 70, 15, 15. No, it should be a third, a third, a third. I think we should have by number of buildings, by district, by whatever. I think it would be logical to do that.
Some of the folks in the audience have an interest in that?
Well, these are small, the finance is a small department. You already have some very purposeful people. You hire somebody for this extra amount, population goes down. I mean, is there really that much of a job? Can't the number of faculty members there get together occasionally or a one-year stipend to set the direction? Do you really need somebody that much of the time overseeing people who are already quite purposeful in their direction?
So it's a great question. Thank you for it. It's when you look at the number of people, Lanny, it's actually a department of 10. When you add up all the people, it would be one of the larger departments, believe it or not, across the system. So it would be larger than the foreign language department at the high school. It would be larger than, I think, even the English department at the high. It's a large department. It is not outside the realm of possibility with any of these positions, arguably, the way that all of these teaching and learning positions fall in that bucket. Any department chairs, curriculum supervisors, they're subject to a budget appropriation annually. I mean, it could literally be that a department chair position would go unfilled for one reason or another. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that at some point, for one reason or another, the position may not need to be filled, would not be filled. I don't think there's any implicit promise that all these positions are always filled. But we've never apportioned a department chairmanship, for lack of a better term, around the size of a department. We looked at that.
But I have to say, I kind of was actually thinking similarly that, unlike something like a subject, I'm kind of questioning how much coordination do you actually need between the chorus at the 4th grade and the visual art program when you're a junior? Like, to a certain extent, while you would want some communication, do you really need...
My personal experience is that the music programs are significantly under-coordinated going from the 2 buildings into the middle school.
So, but let me finish my point. But can I finish my point though? So my thought was, while some coordination is necessary, right now we have a Living Fine Art Techno Art 9 through 12 and a Living Fine Art Techno Art 6 through 8. I guess I was more thinking, couldn't you take the amount of money that we spend on those 2 positions split between the middle school and high school and do more what you're talking of, have a fine art department chair 6 through 12, a technology engineering department chair 6 through 12, whom we pay the same amount that we're currently paying that other mishmash. And so there's coordination 6 through 12, and it's more streamlined in the way that you have proposed. I'm questioning a little that we're spending really $18,000 more, basically just to extend the fine arts department chair to the elementary schools.
So there are things that the department chair does that the curriculum supervisor in that area at the middle school does not do. So the minute you look at those 2, and it's a good thing to do, Carolyn, you look at they're very different positions, the way that they're engineered in the 2 schools. So if you just stick to the $30,000, we get what we have, okay. We do not, in that benefit, have any kind of evaluative oversight. No one really is the point person in a department chair role the way that person is at the middle school. Is that fair to say?
Right.
They're different.
In order to do that model, you'd have to pick up another 0.2 of release time anyway, because otherwise there's not, you don't have that time.
Or you make the high school person the department chair, or a person, not the high school person, the department head at both schools.
Right.
But
the same 0.2.
But you still have this mix that is incoherent of arts and cooking.
Well,
and
actually what it is electives. It's basically our electives.
Yeah, there's no,
I mean,
it's
the
no
department chair.
coherence.
No, but what I'm saying is
I still go back to, we have these separate buildings, we have arts programs that are uncoordinated. It ends up impacting the children's experience. If you look at the amount that we spend on the arts, I think it's underperforming. And it hasn't changed in how long. It's only going to change if there's a leader and somebody that's got goals and objectives and accountability. Our poor buildings don't spontaneously organize themselves very well because of the historic redistrict structure. It takes work. Anytime anything has happened that spans across buildings, it's been usually out of a big push out of the central office, right? And I think we have somebody at the table right now who's enjoying that experience, right? That's Terry.
Yes. I think Michael's right. I think it's a great idea. I think we do need to dedicate somebody that can drive this. I think there's a demand. The plays in the middle school, they end up having kids walk away. I mean, it would be nice to have another body there. It's something FOPA, I think, is desperately interested in. And I think it's also to have the technology piece. I mean, it's long overdue. I think it's a great idea, and the proposal as written makes me, I think, very happy. I think it's a good idea, the way it's written. I don't know about the numbers as far as the allocation.
Right.
I could see some point there, but otherwise, I think this is a really, really good idea for the school system.
I have to agree on with Carolyn. Just the elementary part of it, and the whole K to 12. I just, for the amount of money and the extra money, I mean, we keep saying we don't have enough money for all the things we want to do. We haven't sorted out how we're going to pay a 3-district person, really. It's not,
but
to me, it's not on solid ground.
Right, but the administration's come to us with this as one of their priorities, so they have told us that so even though it might not be what each of us would want to do, that's what they've come to us with.
Right, and then it's our choice to say, yeah, I support that, or no, I don't.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, I love the proposal from a 6 through 12 perspective. If it said position 1, fine arts department share grades 6 through 12, and then position 2, technology engineering department share grades 6 through 12, like, I have no problem with shifting it so that we have a distinct fine arts department chair and a distinct technology engineering. Like, that I absolutely 100% think is the right direction. I think the coordination is necessary. I think having it go 6 through 12 instead of 6 to 8 and 9 through 12 is better. My only disagreement is the $18,000 extra or thereabouts to swoop the elementary schools into it.
Well, it's $2,000 extra, because if you made 2 department chairs, all $16,000 of release time goes to our budget times 2. It's a $2,000 difference.
And to continue, Carolyn, just in that thing of just thinking of regionally.
But it wouldn't be that much, it shouldn't be that much release time if it's only for the, I mean, that doesn't mathematically. Right, then maybe then you change the something, but it's like, but mathematically it doesn't make sense.
Richard, wait,
I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I think the arts are undervalued at these schools, and I
don't think so.
I absolutely do. And it may be that they are well valued compared to our comparison schools. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be valued more. That's what I'm saying. I think that in fact there is a far greater role for arts education at these schools than we're currently seeing. If this pushes in that direction by, as Mike was talking about, integrating what we do at the elementaries with what we try to accomplish here, I think that money is so well spent. That's all.
So Steve, where did Sherborn end up?
So Sherborn conceptually really liked the idea, we went right around the table, would like reconsideration around the apportionment. Feel like 5,900, and I think we're also in the agreement, but we just didn't want to say, okay, well, here's the proposal that's come before the region.
So are you going around to all 2 schools and then coming back again?
Right,
so
we intend to recalibrate the apportionment, because I think that was a point well taken, but it is critical, and Carolyn, just to your point, it's so critical that we really think of the scaffolding and the spiraling K through 12. It's I think to be thinking strictly 6 to 12, it further kind of perpetuates the isolation, and I just don't think programmatically, instructionally, it's not doing our kids as collaborative as people are. To Michael's, people just don't kind of just get together and do this stuff.
If you want a really strong high school music program, it starts in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. And in the absence of that, you never make it up. The kids that end up reading
well, we can have a strong program without having a
no, because because right now there's nothing that's going to address the difference in how Chickering approaches their performing arts program than what Sherborn does, and you see it exactly in the 6th grade. It falls apart because there's just historically different approaches to teaching kids instruments. It's just, all you have to do is go to that combined concert, and you would see it. I'm just saying that whereas math and English and a lot of other things they've been pushing on for years now to bring them into alignment, this is an area, if we want something that's thriving by high school, you have to start there. In the absence of it, then what we have is what we'll always have, I think.
So, if we're not voting on this, it's 8:20, I assume we need to move along.
Yes, exactly. You don't need us.
No, what we'll do is we'll revisit it, and we'll bring forward a reformulated approach.
All right. Now. You want to talk about cell phone?
thought that was difficult.
So wait till Volker shows up at our next
You seem like a very quiet,
That's really well.
Okay.
I know Judy.
All right, time to move to the fiscal 16, the unveiling of the fiscal 16 regional school committee budget. Yeah. I know that everyone out there has been just holding their breath waiting for this part of tonight's agenda.
Ready?
Ready to go.
Okay, if it's okay with Ms. White, what we thought we would do is motor through the talking points. So if you look at it's on letterhead.
Wait, I don't think you have to read through each of them, though. Maybe get the highlight. It's supposed to reading all 5 pages.
I read them, I really thought they were great. I don't need to hear them, but if you feel there's anything to address the public, I'm certainly willing to listen to anything.
All right.
Anyone else? I mean, I'm happy to read them.
The memo?
I go
I think
with,
we need to have
almost substantial.
Okay.
But just highlights. Highlights.
So you think we should go through them?
No, not in this level
Not
of detail.
5 pages of them, I don't think.
No, just.
And our audiences have
highlights
the
of the
benefit of
Are you
the
comfortable
memo
with
too,
that?
right?
I mean,
Yeah, no, I mean, we have the points, I mean, they're pretty significant, I mean, some of them are significant. I think maybe we'll begin with a few of them, and then cherry pick.
Perfect.
Is that okay?
That sounds good.
Okay. So if let's take it from the top, and then I think when we get to the ones that are, we can just sort of glide over them. But this proposed budget seeks to remind school committees, town finance committees, taxpayers that the region is slated to receive additional Chapter 70 money in the amount of $177,246 net of school choice charges, and additional Chapter 71 funds in the amount of $128,373 in fiscal year 2015. The adopted fiscal 2015 budget reflects $1,423,306 in Chapter 70 and $373,390 in Chapter 71 funds. This proposed budget considered guidance provided by Dover-Sherborn and Sherborn Advisory with respect to fiscal year 2016 budget development. Specifically, Sherborn Advisory sought a maximum of 1.5% or $86,430 increase in the operating budget and $179,946 or 12% benefit cost increase for the region for a total of $266,376 in allowable fiscal 2016 increases. In its communication, Dover-Sherborn requested a level service budget proposal from all departments for fiscal year 2016. Both member towns seek responsible and reasonable budgets, inclusive of general education and both in and out of district special education costs. It reflects in item 3, we speak to operating assessment percentages, and in item 4, we speak to the debt assessment percentages. We did that simply so that it's captured, it's here, it's memorialized in the document, and we can just make sure we're fact-checking everything. Number 5, this proposed budget demonstrates administration's appreciation for the fact that our 2 member towns almost entirely fund our first-class school system via local individual property taxes, where both the base, the value of real estate, and the multiplier, the tax rate applied, are legally constrained in terms of growth. We looked in item number 6 around enrollment and determined that the region enrollment's fairly static for next year. We don't, the bubble's not bursting anytime soon at the region. It reflects all of our known retirements as of October 1st. That's important to note. There are a couple of retirements that are in the pipeline, but they're not baked into the model because we don't have those in writing.
February 1st.
No, so I said there's none.
No requirements.
I said
February
0.
1st is the deadline.
Exactly.
What's the date for reporting them?
February 1st.
It's really important, I think, to look at number 9. The proposed budget was built with a watchful eye on the state of the Commonwealth's financial health. Although we are not largely dependent on Chapter 70 that flows from the state, said funds are certainly part of our budget model. Accordingly, Governor Patrick's plan to trim $329 million in spending from the $36.5 billion state budget announced the week of November 10th and referenced in November 20th has certainly caught our eye and our attention. Such mid-year cuts are referred to as 9C cuts. The areas over which Governor Patrick can make these cuts include circuit breaker, regional transportation, and NetGo. NetGo has already been cut. We received a notification yesterday, now. This cost $3,643. And that goes
Yes, FY.
now.
Now, 15.
Point now.
What now?
I had a conversation with Representative Denise Garlick last Wednesday morning, and she was on campus for a different reason, and she suggested that the districts just be patient with the legislators, let them work through this. One governor's leaving, another governor's coming in.
Say, to what extent, even if a decision's made, is it necessarily going to be the same decision January?
I will say I was a little surprised to see the MECO cut as quickly as it, and I think maybe that department from DESI was really quick to kind of move on that because maybe it's premature. We speak to the MECO program in item 11. In item 12, and very important with respect to circuit breaker, the approved fiscal 2015 state budget nearly fully funds the special ed circuit breaker program. Used to offset special education costs that are extraordinary and difficult to anticipate, the fiscal 2015 appropriation was $257 million, not for the district. This is the third year in a row that the fund has increased. By way of background, the last time the state was able to meet the special education breaker commitment over a 3-year period, 2006 and 2008. This covers for extraordinary claims only, so it's not universally applied. This proposed budget reflects student migration from the elementary schools to Dover-Sherborn Middle School and assumes migration of expenses related to certain student cohorts to the middle school as well. Specifically, the 1.5% or $101,197 in allowable operating budget expense increases at Pine Hill, none of which are realized in the proposed fiscal 16 budget for Pine Hill, should logically flow to the region's fiscal year 2016 budget, given that the aggregate student population shift. That simply means that Pine Hill, in its total inclusive of special education costs, came in at a negative 0.75% budget. So we're simply making the argument, as we did last year, you're not having deja vu, that it's the enrollment bubbles here, and that maybe we want to look and ask our towns to allow those funds that would have gone to Pine Hill to potentially float the region. That's point 13. Point 14. It reflects the reassignment of the 20% person, this is middle school math teacher salary that was in a Title I grant this year. This budget transfers that 20% of teaching salary back into the operating budget so that those Title I funds can be freed up to allow students who are identified as needing reading support through our SRI assessment at the middle school to allow us to be able to use Title I funds for really what they're intended for, which is reading intervention support. This proposed budget reflects the addition of one FTE, one teaching position at the high school. This position is needed to respond to increasing class sizes. It should be noted that the high school has not requested additional teaching staff at all in recent years, despite a steady increase in student population. This proposed position, assigned a prospective salary of $70,040, is included in the overall $264,880 or 5.9% high school teacher salary line increase. So John Smith came forward, responding, class size, I need another teaching position. How that gets chiseled out, Mr. Smith, probably math science?
Probably math science, yep.
You need somebody that can straddle?
Not necessarily. Well, yes, definitely somebody who could straddle, and it would likely be in the area of mathematics and physics, because we also have somebody who's dual certified who could move from physics to chemistry, etc. And the other rationale is when you look at your sections, math and science actually have two of the smaller sections in an entire high school for FTEs. That's why the other rationale for math and science.
The other, it should probably be noted that while the enrollment bubble moved through the middle school, literally, other than the language-based teacher who was hired for a pretty explicit purpose, you all know from being there or hearing or being asked, that bubble moved through the middle school and there was no additional requests for teachers. Part of that was the dedication of our Teachers Association. Their teachers here are so dedicated, they really felt like, class size can go up a little bit. We really don't want to bring people in, and we may then in a few years have to lift because of enrollment reductions. and they really allow class sizes to go up, and we're just at a point now where you're seeing class sizes are breaking. The high school teacher salary line also includes $12,051 for 0.2 FTE of the ELL teacher. We have an ELL teacher. She services all of our districts, and we need 0.2 of her assigned to the high school for next year because of our ELL population. There's not much we can do about that. We need a 0.2 licensed educator to work with our ELL students. Item 17, you can read certainly on your own. The proposed budget reflects longevity payments scheduled for the 15-16 school year, and Claire will know as well as the $25,000 placeholder for each school, a total of $50,000 required by the recently ratified educators contract. Essentially, if an educator notifies us, this is my last year, I haven't participated in the longevity payment thus far, I may have participated in the way that it's structured in the contract, I can take this one-time $5,000 payout at the end of this year. There's no turning back on my notification to retire. The contract calls for us administratively to include 5 of those $5,000 at the middle school, 5 of those $5,000 at the high school, for a total of $50,000. Now, do we honestly think we're going to have 10 retirements out of the region next year? There's not a chance. So that is a line that will probably deflate.
So we have to put it in today, but by February 5th, or whenever we next bring this.
We don't have to put it in, we have to be able to pay it.
Right. So right now it's in there.
Yeah,
And full amount.
It's in at the full 10 spots.
Yes.
And it's in
If
it.
we had 10 retirements,
We
we'd certainly recoup it in the year.
salaries.
So, no, but this is what I don't get. We have to budget it but not know until next February if somebody's going to elect to take it, or is this?
Right.
That's right.
But the chances of 5 people
Or 10.
No,
got it all at once.
So it's not what we're going to learn in February.
Yes, it is.
To some degree, yeah.
Yes, it is.
But this is dollars for next year. Those
No,
people
you're
are
right,
going to be gone.
You're right.
Oh, I see what you mean. Oh, right.
It sits as a placeholder.
It sits as a
People will know.
placeholder. By
The following
February, we'll
Right,
know
right,
if we
sorry.
have a favorable, but if they elect on February 1st of next year, then it's a claim on that 50,000.
Right. If something unusual
Yeah.
happened, then 10 people will.
Correct.
We decided they
The
wanted-
committee's on the hook.
We have the money, but then we know on February 2nd, we'll have a favorable piece that goes into that year's.
Provision for
Forecast.
2016, correct.
And we don't have that in this budget. this
Well, you
year.
do, because it's still sitting in the contracted settlement
Right.
number.
It's in this year's contract, it's not a separate line item because
Well,
this
we
is
didn't
how
know.
we constructed this year's.
So if we only had 2 elect in the next couple months, then there would be 40,000 that could be effectively released into
They might not have
Maybe
had the
not
full
that
amount.
amount.
Right,
Okay.
because it was just a lump sum.
Right.
But that's an important, it hits both elementaries too, because the contract calls for 5 placeholders in each school. So Pine Hill has 25,000, Dover will have 25,000 sitting there in the Chickering budget. The proposed budget reflects a 12% increase for Norfolk County retirement. The proposed budget allows the region to replenish the unemployment fund by $5,000. The region is a pay-as-you-go system whereby we pay directly for eligible unemployment claims, and the fund balance is about $37,000 as of June 30th. So that fund balance has gone down over the past few years as a result of some claims. This proposed budget reflects the addition of 2, this is important, Tier 3 educational assistants with specific training to meet students' needs. So we have an influx of students with unprecedented needs that are very specific. Those students are in our middle school now. They'll soon matriculate into the high school, presumably, and we need some additional educational assistance. You'll recall when we structured that contract, it's Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 3 is a more significant pay. It's someone who is degreed, who has specific training in particular areas. This is not sort of your teacher helper. This is somebody who really brings a discrete skill set. So this is very clearly to meet students' needs.
And it's IEP related.
IEP related.
504 or something like that.
trying to find other lines. The other, but we're going to question.
24.
So number 23 is also important to speak to. It includes the appropriation of $12,000 in system-wide professional development to support the qualified peer observer aspect of the. So the educator evaluation system has in it a mechanism for teachers to become qualified peer observers, QPOs. And we are providing sort of a framework for people to be able to go through a very highly prescribed coursework in order to become credentialed to be a qualified peer observer. Number 24, Chris wants me to draw our attention to. This proposed budget reflects 12% increase for health care, a $12,000 increase for employer share Medicare, and allows for 9 health care plan changes stemming from qualifying events and personnel changes. So as Chris alluded to, this year, we haven't had a lot of the plan changes, but I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, we were
clever, with plan changes. So that's something, it could land at 9, it could come in significantly lower than that.
Healthcare actually increase comes when?
We'll know that, they haven't set the meeting yet, but I would say in February.
Usually around Valentine's.
Yeah.
And roughly speaking, what's the percent in terms of dollars?
It's 2.7 million, so 1% is
2%.
Yeah.
27.
Yeah.
And I believe Sherman Advisory's guidance on Sherman's building on 12% as well. Take the model.
Yeah, it is.
It's between 10 and 15, I know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine.
And in the contract negotiations, when you guys were trying to model total compensation, what numbers were you guys taking in for healthcare? 7? Sure.
Because that's what we knew at that point.
Yeah, no, I think that wasn't expecting you guys with perfect clarity to forecast out those 3 years, but it was expected 7% a year.
This proposed, number 25, I'm sorry, this proposed budget reflects the migration of salary for TVI, teachers visually impaired, to meet students' needs, students matriculating to the middle school. This proposed budget reflects the migration of the cost for an orientation and mobility instructor to the middle school as well, again connected very much to students' needs. This proposed budget, and those costs will come out of the elementary budget in which they currently reside. So you'll see a deflation for the other school committees as well. Number 27, the acquisition of $13,643 in specialized equipment, again connected to particular students' needs. So again, what we see come out of one budget moves into another because students are moving. Reflects a 9.1% or $2,555 reduction in telephone service fee. That's relatively the reintegration of the 20% high school math teacher who was previously relieved of teaching one section of math as she served as the school's master scheduler. Given that the newly appointed assistant headmaster oversees scheduling on a go-forward basis. So essentially, we had a math teacher at the high school who was released from teaching one section during the day because she had scheduling responsibilities. That teacher will be returning to full teaching complement because the assistant headmaster at the high school will take on scheduling. So we've gained a section of math instruction in that way. Number 31. This proposed budget reflects an estimated 16.4% increase in overall increase for student bus transportation, allowing for contract negotiations. That's probably a little bit high, so that may be a line that comes down. This proposed budget level funds the plant and facilities reserve fund at $86,490 as it's been for the past 4 or 5 years. This proposed budget assumes $500,000 use of E&D for fiscal year 2016. By way of background, we say that as of June 30, 2014, the Regents E&D was certified at $980,484, predicated on $500,000 in use this year. The proposed budget includes $3,700 or 6.9 increase for the wastewater treatment facility contract and service. That covers our contract with Weston and Sampson, who manages our wastewater treatment facility. 35 is important. This proposed budget reflects an additional 0.5 FTE school adjustment counselor at a cost of $30,128 and $7,000 in supplemental tutoring. We currently employ one adjustment counselor at the region, but the sharp increase in students' social emotional needs in the past 2 years prompted the need for additional adjustment social worker support. This adjustment counselor will work with a defined cohort of students in need of daily support from a licensed social worker. The current 1.0 adjustment counselor maintains a caseload of 65 students between the middle school and high school. Each of these students has needs that are met through regular meetings with the adjustment counselor. Additionally, the adjustment counselor coordinates consultation with school staff, parents, guardians, and outside providers. In addition to a regular caseload, the adjustment counselor has been intimately involved in meeting the needs of at least 6 students who experienced acute crises requiring emergent hospitalization, in most instances, specialized residential program placement, and that's within the past 2 months. This year alone, we have witnessed a significant increase in such cases. When a student in such circumstances returns to the school, we need the adjustment counselor to coordinate scheduling, re-entry, coordinating makeup work, speaking with physicians, reviewing discharge summaries, and consulting with DS staff. It includes a placeholder for the minute taker at school committee meetings.
So that used to be in the school committee,
Contract.
yeah. I'm an employee.
She's an employee.
Yeah, because of the IRS.
The IRS audit requires Amy to be one of our very own. Right, Amy? Mm-hmm. This proposed budget, while releasing funds set aside for all contracts negotiated and settled in the past few months, also contains a placeholder in the school committee negotiations line for business office transitions. So this is transition. This proposed budget reflects $4,750 increase in the annual audit for a total cost of $20,000. It includes a placeholder for our increased use of Bedfield water. An increase in, this budget reflects an 18.6% increase in electricity costs.
So, if we were to move forward on the well, would that, there's no reason that project couldn't get completed early in the summer or some point during, so that we could avoid all of the water costs that are in this budget, correct? I just want to be 100% clear before we. No, I know, but I just want to.
Well, it would take about 6 to 8 weeks, Michael, if it's a biddable item, between putting anything together and it's over 25,000, so.
I think what he's asking is, does this line item go away once the well is, the second well would be, whenever that point in time is?
But this is, we would not be able to get it done fast enough I mean, do we use it all in the summer, or is it spread out?
We don't get it until July 1st, we don't get the money.
No, I'm just trying to find.
I would say the majority of it is summer and spring and fall.
So
spring, fall.
Okay, so
everything but the winter when it's
so there could be positive benefit come spring of FY16 or in calendar. The spring is 16. Right. If we did the project, we would eliminate all purchases from the way it's going to be structured.
Right. This proposed budget reflects an 18.6% increase in electricity costs. Our fixed rate contract expires in December 2015. Our current supply rate is fixed at 0.0746 kilowatts per hour. Given that the current market rate is 0.1143 and is anticipated to go as high as 0.185 over the next 12 months, we locked in for 12 months at 0.11463. Accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Locked. Yeah. This proposed budget reflects a $23,000 or 12.2% decrease in heating utility costs. Although our current fixed supply rate expires in June 2015, the sizable reduction is reasonable based upon actual utilization and the new, more favorable fixed rate of 0.07145 for 24 months. This proposed budget reflects a 2% increase for administrators and IT support staff. This proposed budget reflects 10.9% or $25,911 for 2 reasons. First, the increase accounts for the contractually agreed upon 1.6% ratio increase. Second, the increase includes 6 additional assistant coaching positions needed to maintain the 25-to-1 student-athlete coach ratio on the following non-cut teams. Those should look eerily familiar. Number 44, this proposed budget reflects the contractually negotiated increase for all associations, including all of them, custodians, food service, etc. The fiscal year 2016 budget is prepared for the elementary schools, which maintain financial responsibility for out-of-district placed students, reflect a total of $1,030,514, $870,816 net of circuit breaker in related OOD costs for students in grades 6 through 12 from Sherborn, and $2,659,196 budgeted at gross for students in grades 6 through 12, age 22 rather, from Dover. These figures assume a 3% tuition and a 2% transportation increase. This budget includes the region share of a proposed K-12 Fine Arts Department share and the reconfiguration of the technology engineering instructional delivery line. This modest increase.
Not so much.
And we've just discussed that ad nauseum, so we can skip that. This proposed budget reflects the maturity of an equipment lease of $10,000 included in fiscal 2015. The proposed budget anticipates favorable action by the Regional School Committee at its December 2nd meeting. With respect to bond refunding, we've gone through those numbers a bit there, so I'll just draw your attention. Could be an estimated savings of $1.1 million over the remaining 10-year life of the bonds. The actual cost savings would not be known until February. This proposed budget reflecting an overall 5.2% or $1,154,584 increase over fiscal year 2015. Regional budget is responsibly constructed in that it provides level services against a landscape of increasing enrollment. This proposed budget does not include a placeholder for OPEB contributions. For informational purposes, however, we offer the following concerning the status of the region's OPEB obligations as of June 30th, 2013, as reflected in our audited fiscal year 2013 financials. OPEB obligation as of June 30th, 2012 was $3.8 million. The annual contribution, bless you, was $1.6 million. The pay-as-you-go on that was $628 for a net increase that year of $983,888.
Just so you know, we never got this updated document.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there's some version.
We're not.
In our book, we still have the old ones. I think those guys are following it. We are right now.
Ask for Michelle.
There you go.
This is whole bunch.
Yeah, I got it.
Oh, you've numbered them.
Yeah.
Would you start again?
Can you explain what you're distributing?
Yours is up to date. We have one from last Wednesday, and it
So he was
was
just
up to date.
talking about something that's not on our copy.
You have the update on Kathy.
In our packet.
Yeah.
Got it.
What you're looking at right now is
You've
up
got
to
the numbers
date.
to follow along all this long work.
We're making our own. Aha! Now that you're almost done, Steve, we'll tell you that.
We'll be with you in just a second.
So we were expecting you to clue me.
Yeah, we're following well enough.
You were?
Yep.
Because we've all read it, we knew what we were talking about.
That's right. And we reference here the actuarial study will be done in 2015 on OPEB. So we want to make sure that in addition to simply saying the budget doesn't have a placeholder for OPEB, we just want to raise the fluency level around these numbers and around that obligation. So we decided to include it.
So that's what's sitting on the balance sheet,
4872754.
the 388.
Well, it's in the footnotes right now, Michael.
Yeah.
They don't require
That's
it.
on the file. That's the part that they're amortizing that we're not putting money towards ends up on the balance sheet. The total liabilities in the actuarial reports is more like
Right.
14 or 18.
Yeah.
Those are the talking points. And I'm sorry to do such a drive-through version of it, but I certainly read. There are a number. We had 51 talking points this year. I think it's considerably more than last year. There were a lot of nuances in this budget we felt that we needed to really speak to. There are some requests the school committee asked us to bring forward what we need to offer level service experience. And we think with this budget we can deliver what what the students need and the faculty need to do their job for next year. Thank you. Do we hear a motion to approve the budget?
So to remind everyone that the vote is just to approve a budget to meet the town's deadlines.
Correct.
It's the high water mark.
This is this budget. And that this budget may change, may go up, may go down.
So, and that's a good point, Claire. So the transportation line, the retirement variable, the longevity payments are, they're variables that are quite fluid and that are, they're, in our estimation, they're high. But it creates that high water mark and allows us to deflate as need be.
I think one of the things that I took away is when I actually added up some of the numbers that were in your talking points is there are a lot of lines in this budget that are non-negotiable. So if given our need to provide free and public education, so many of the increases in there, because I'm sure that my eye was drawn, as will yours be, to anything that had a greater than 3% increase, because that's just the way I think many of us look at budgets. And so a lot of the things that jumped out at me were increases for special ed teacher salary, the teacher aides that you talked about, the tier 3, that classroom equipment, the Kurzweil system, middle school equipment, the adjustment counselor. All of those things are basically required of us to provide free and public education. So that actually added up, and maybe I don't have the numbers exactly right, but basically $250,000 of the operating budget variance. So $252,000 or 22% of the 1.1 that is in that variance is basically non-negotiable.
Well, and the other point I was thinking along those same lines is not only is it non-negotiable, but from my perspective, it's actually kind of a cost savings because we're keeping a lot of these kids, which for other reasons is a good thing, but in addition, by providing these services, these kids are now staying here instead of becoming part of our out-of-district line item. So I think every time we have a special aide who can keep the kid here in our system instead of putting that child on a bus and sending them to some other school, in fact, it's money, not only required, but well worth spending.
And better for the kids.
And better for the kids.
It's better for the kids, and it's a credit to our teaching faculty, and it's also, if I could just use the plug, also for Terry Green's position, the fact that we now have somebody who's really looking at special education K through 12, there just are not a lot of conversations around students being out of district placed. There's just this huge mindfulness around that, and Terry's looking at that system-wide. What can we do, because it's in the child's best interest, but there are ancillary benefits to those transactions as well. So thank you, Terry, for your work on that. And thank you, Chris, in the business office for your work in developing the budget. Heidi, Chris, everyone in the business office.
So high-level questions, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two, actually. One is the first point where the funds, the Chapter 70 and 71 funds that we're getting for 2015, isn't clear to me how that affects the 2016 budget.
So we're in one lens. Chris, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah,
I will. Level.
When we budgeted the previous fiscal year, we basically level fund whatever we received in 14 is what we carry forward in 15. However, when the budget was actually approved in June, we actually received an additional $300,000 more than the previous fiscal year in transportation aid and Chapter 70 aid. Because that has two implications. It falls out to free cash or E&D for FY15, and we get to roll it forward, assuming it's level funded in 16.
Right.
However, that's a big assumption now that they're talking about these 9C cuts.
So is that part of the,
Yes. So hold on that for a sec. We'll get to that. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Because that's my second question, is actually on this page.
Okay.
Let us.
So before we get to that, are there any other questions on the talking points first?
The school committee needs these.
Right.
They made them.
Oh, I thought you were writing to us.
Oh, you did. That's right, Chris. Thank you. You did. Yep.
Right.
So does everyone have this revised? You have 2 columns.
Yes. Right. Okay. So no other questions on the talking points. So now, do you need one? Sorry. Okay. So, Basically, this chart that has the two columns on it, you guys have seen before. So it takes the detailed budget that's behind it and puts it into a much smaller number of buckets that we can look at: salary and comp, benefits, insurance, property, etc. And what that all falls down to is a operating budget variance of 1.17 over last year, which is a 5.2% increase. So the obvious question that comes next is, how does that line up with the guidance that we've been given by our towns? And so what falls below that, and I'll let Chris explain that, is how that variance compares to what the guidance that we've gotten from the towns.
Okay. There's two columns. The first one is the best case if there were no additional 9C cuts in FY15, because it would affect 16 as well.
Sorry. So in case, because this took me about 4 hours to figure out, to understand finally. So if maybe you're faster than I am, but in case you want one more go at it. So when she budgets for fiscal 16, they use their best guess as what's going on currently in 15. What is currently going on in 15 is really good. We got an extra $300,000. So if that stays the same for 16, we're good. That's another $300,000. Because they've announced the 9C cuts, that $300,000 might go away, and therefore our level fund might not be able to include that full $300,000. So that's why two columns have now been created. If the 9C cuts don't go through and they level fund it, it's an extra $318. If the 9C cuts go through anywhere up to that 318 level, we could end up in the worst case column.
In which memo had the 9C cuts summarized?
It was in the talking points.
It was in the talking points?
Yep.
But I don't have the two column one.
Oh, that was just handed out. No, I mean, it was on your page when you showed up.
I have the old one.
Someone might have stolen it from you.
Okay.
You're right.
So that gets our budget variance down from 1.2 million to 900,000 or 852. Under the Sherborn guidance letter, they're allowing us $266,000, or 1.5% increase between the operating budget and healthcare. That factored in for the difference, because we received just level service guidance. We didn't really receive a hard number from Dover. So I just factored in what that increase would apply given their existing allocation.
Given your operating assessment percentage.
The 1.5 is for the healthcare. That's a different number.
No, it's 1.5/12.
Right.
The number 266,376. It's in your advisory, Mary. That's the
total
of both your operating and your benefits.
I didn't see that part of it.
Yeah.
It's in the talking points.
So
No,
under the best case scenario, if you follow this, now our balance over the guidance in total is 299,300 grand. When you divvy that up, but I have to point out the MLC is not factored in here, which could have an impact, but we don't get that number until the governor's budget comes out. So therefore, we're assuming the same number for last year. And that gets our number down for over Sherborn's guidance to 139,561, and Dover would be over if they were to live with the same 1.5% increase by 159,733. There are two other additional considerations, though, that we think is worth notating. As Steve had mentioned, the Pine Hill budget was at a 1.5% increase was anticipating to go up an extra 110,000. That actually is going down by 75 basis points. So we're using the same approach to advisory and saying let those dollars follow the children. So that's the consideration, and that would go completely against Sherborn's deficit there. And then there's even though capital has to be, the refunding has to be utilized to offset the debt service, we built the debt service numbers, which is included in this 1,154,000 based upon the full impact, like no refunding existed. So that, based on the savings that were identified the first go around of about 120,000, that's additional money in effect that would be utilized to reduce capital assessment or debt assessment. So we could, if nothing were to happen and the 9C cuts didn't happen and we did nothing, we'd be pretty close to meeting the numbers that were presented to us by advisory. Now, the worst case scenario obviously does change that, and I don't think I'll have to go through all that.
But the other thing to remember is that there are those 3 or 4 line items in the budget which can naturally deflate, right? So you could take your worst case scenario, truly worst case, and that could be mitigated by some natural reductions in the transportation at 16%, the longevity and the retirements, right? So that could gobble up some of our issue.
The retirements don't come in.
The longevity can't go down because we won't know this until February 1st, 2016.
Right.
The regional
Transportation.
No, but the current.
No, the current will.
Current money, yeah.
Retirements will have an impact.
The current, the money set aside in the current budget for contract settlements, so that includes some of the longevity. There may be.
Right, but that doesn't help fiscal 16, other than salary.
Retirements will though, because I built the budget assuming no retirements. So if we have a teacher that announces retirement February 1, not only will it will have an impact in 16.
Right,
on the
salary.
On the salary
longevity.
It sure will. I mean, we know from the local budgets from both elementary schools, we've seen the numbers from that too.
So just, I mean, just to be, the reason why we wanted to put in the best case and worst case is we didn't want 3 months from now, if there are a lot of if the 9C cuts happen, and we went, oh, well, we thought we were going to be very close, and now we're no longer very close. We just wanted to make sure that all the scenarios were on the table. All right. Any questions on that page? All right.
And so, Dana, January, we'll talk about the detail of the questions that we've shared.
Right. So one of the things that that a few of us have done who have already had a chance to go through this line by line is we probably have 24 questions between us already that Chris has been able to answer very quickly. That what we'd like to do is for each of the line items in the budget, what you'll notice as you start reading through it is the comment section, I think, has been more populated this year than in past years. And between us, I think we probably have another 10 or 15 comments to add to these points that I think for someone reading through it will make it easier to understand and also hopefully head off a lot of those questions that you might read and say, wow, why was this line item up 5 per the middle school nurses was up 4% because there was a lane and a step change. So that we've already asked some of those questions, so rather than asking the same question 4 or 5 times, what we'd like to do is populate the comment section before this gets too widely distributed, because otherwise people are just going to start asking the same questions. We also think if we do that, then there's one repository for all the answers, as opposed to emails to one group and emails to another group and emails coming from Chris, and that seems like an opportunity to everything get lost.
So that's what you were telling
So
me
that's-
briefly before the meeting, so.
Exactly.
What's the timeline for then distributing that revised budget with comments?
How about, we can do that in the next week, right?
I've got Dover.
Oh, you have Dover when?
But we could, but that's gonna be out the door next Thursday, so, but I basically have to have it pretty much.
But I think if I come to you with what, I mean, you and I have already done a dozen of them.
I would say
if anyone else of you guys have specific questions, if you want to get them to me, I mean, Chris, I think it would take no more than an hour.
Yeah, that's fine.
Then I would say by the end of next week.
That's
How about that?
perfect.
And then we'll have Tricia get them all copied, recopied in that format, and get them to you guys to give out to your
Should we summarize the questions that came up in the process as well? So we just have a long list and then just say, go see this area?
Well, are there
Just
maybe
have a
questions that
crosswalk
aren't
it?
on that?
Sure.
On that spreadsheet, so.
Right, but I think a
That
lot
way
of them
everyone
come to
can
the
see,
spreadsheet. Yes.
these are the issues that come up, and then you can go into the actual budget.
Right.
And look at point A, point B, point C, whatever.
Right.
Columns.
Sure.
And kind of crosswalk people through that back into the detailed numbers.
So you don't want to hear our questions until you give us your
Well.
Exactly.
You're probably asking Mary the same questions
Well, let's-
that we asked, so.
So I mean, that's fine, I'm just asking.
If
Well,
you,
I'm wondering, does it make sense for
for-
them to
I know, that's what
email
I'm
their
wondering. If you have
and then
questions already,
to
maybe
make
we
sure
should just
she
get them and then
gets
we'll just do
them?
this once.
Or I was thinking maybe she should email them in, not to
Email
email,
them
but
to me.
email them to Dana.
Do you have them written down, or are they all?
Sure.
Oh, okay, that's what I mean. Right, so all I'm saying is, before you spend too much time looking at it and generating a page and a half of email questions,
Right.
I probably already had 10 of the same
Right.
questions.
So you're saying, just hold on.
Hold on with the questions. Yeah, I thought you already had questions.
And we'll give you a sheet of all the questions asked and answered.
Come on.
Right,
So
right.
with great respect for the timelines that you have, Chris, with getting all three budgets out, I just mentioned that the Dover-Sherborn committee meets next Wednesday, and that's our only meeting in December.
Okay,
So if it's not.
okay, then we'll do it by next Wednesday.
If that's possible, that would be great.
Yep.
If it's not possible, then maybe you could just communicate to Brooks and I, we'll just
No, we can do that.
find a way.
We'll do
Okay,
it.
That would be awesome.
We actually will meet next Wednesday as well, we were supposed to.
There you go.
So it has to
Perfect,
be
we have a
done by
deadline.
Wednesday.
All right. So I would say then, for you guys, any questions that you have by the end of this week, no later than, on any specifics.
And then, Dana, what's the next step? Remind us all what happens in January.
So in January, then, we'll go through and answer.
So we bring our questions that
Correct.
we might have to
Yes,
January.
as would this group, and that would be our chance to answer any questions, since we can't really answer them by email.
Okay, so very good.
Didn't we look for a February meeting that was?
But they might have questions. We're going to talk about it
Okay, I'm just trying to
among ourselves in
Okay.
January, if
Okay.
they have
And
questions that they
more,
want
we'll
to.
just keep working our way through them.
Right.
I thought the difference was that one of those, the February meeting, we were going to have full complements
Yes.
of.
Yeah, we'll still get more
Okay.
questions on February 11th,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But hopefully we'll have answered.
But hopefully there'll be new questions.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
moving on.
Excellent.
So I will make a motion to approve the budget for FY 16 as presented this evening to submit to the towns of Dover and Sherborn.
Perfect. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any more discussion on it? No? All those in favor? All right. We will get it to you as annotated as possible by next Wednesday. Okay. Well done. And it's out of the gate. Okay.
Well, we do have the.
Now, capital. We were talking about capital next?
Michael, would you like to talk about that?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I'm out of here.
Wait, don't leave. We're talking about capital. Don't you want to talk about capital?
I think you all have the correct, you all need this.
Okay.
Let me make sure this.
Well, do we have any up there?
They have,
Their books are.
their books are actually up there.
Have
They
it.
have them up to date.
By the way, how do I get myself off the physical packet list and onto the email list?
Sure.
Oh, just email Cheryl.
Okay.
Do you have another one?
Yes, we do.
Oh, sorry, one more.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Michael, it is all yours.
So, the number's going down.
First of all, we need to recognize that Lori is now part of the
Part of
capital
the team.
subcommittee.
She's in that absorbing it phase. She's still studying the 20-year book. After she's passed her test, then she'll move on to the active stage.
Like the London cab.
So we're in section 5, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
So we have, back in October, we did a very rough cut, and it was at 416,000. We're currently at 358,000, again, with the intent that these are high watermark numbers, and we'll keep working it down. In this is 104,000 of items that we would term efficiency. So if it looks like our payback numbers for these types of LED lighting upgrades make sense, then we would continue to keep them in the proposal for this year. We pretty much, there were a few things that are notated on the second page. They're kind of deferred and we're going to look at it next year, but they weren't very significant. So the current item that is largest is now $104,000 estimated for the LED lighting. We're still waiting for a new set of incentives that get published by NSTAR in January and figuring out the actual payback components, how much kilowatt savings there would be and what our final electricity rate we should be using to translate that into payback. The well water we've dropped, or the second well we've dropped roughly between Steve and I down to 40,000. We're still working on the final numbers for what we think is a good estimate for the well, plus what the payback would be on savings for no longer having to buy water from Medfield. But I think that that's looking very favorable, and I think that it would stay in because it behooves us to drill our own than buy it, to supplement from Medfield. Many of the numbers now have quotes, and I think what was good, or current estimates, and I think what was good to see was when you looked at the sum total of them, based upon what we were given several years ago from the on-site insight report, all the numbers were bouncing out really close, either a little bit higher or a little bit lower, but if you added them up, there's no significant bias in one direction that says that those numbers that we're getting each year out of the on-site insight report were out of whack. So I think that that's heartening now that we're kind of our third year into this study that they did. One item was added at the moment, and that is the gym. Apparently getting gyms floors resurfaced is a scarce commodity. And so we've got, we wanted to do the high school gym floor, but we've got a slot to do the high school and the middle school gym floor. And they'll finally get around, I guess, doing the Chickering gym floor, which was missed this last year. And the cost of both of those is less than what was in this report to begin with, but by doing the middle school floor earlier, it has raised the total to, where the line item is. Sorry about that.
30, I think.
So there should be 30, and it should be showing up in 2016. I should have had an item moved forward. I may need to double check that part of the gym.
Middle school gym is 22.5. Oh, that's walls and ceilings.
Middle school 14 and 18.
And high school
Right,
16.
the 18 and the 14.
Okay,
is
I did
32.
move it to 16. Yeah. Okay, so we're set. So that was the 32. So the high school one, I think, was originally as a placeholder of around 26,000. So it's gone down, but then we moved an item forward. But most of that is just to get it done while somebody's able to do it in the summertime. Anything significant from the committee that?
I guess what I'd ask is, what aren't we seeing here that may have shown up on this year's list in previous years? That's not too complicated a question.
So there's the area between the high school gym and the school building. It's kind of a semi-interior, semi-exterior courtyard. That's, I think, in Dana and Steve's area, just kind of come up
Brainstorming with
some thoughts about
whether
what
we
to
can better
do with
utilize
it.
space before we spend any money on that.
So there's no, but is there a critical maintenance issue?
No.
It's just kind of,
No, I think
it's
they-
underutilized space given the
So these are the 4 things
given
that
the
fell
need
off.
for the students to have more time. I mean, there is kind of a shortage of basis for students, I think, to aggregate or congregate.
There were four
You know,
things
given
that
it
fell
was
off
the
the
current
list.
enrollment.
The piano restoration, the courtyard, site furnishings, and security that was done that was put into the 15 budget.
Because they need
Right.
more research.
Right.
Or
Or it was taken care
spoken
of.
for in this budget. There are some other additional site furnishings, and the site furnishings comment is definitely wrong. That's not refer to payback analysis. That is, we're potentially exploring who can third-party fund.
Mine says research third-party fund. On the bottom. Parking lot items removed.
Okay, but we're on
Oh,
the one from this morning, because they get time-stamped.
Any other questions on it, on that 358?
I just wanted to ask two things, if that's okay. One, how much, are all of these estimates, like real estimate numbers?
Yep.
I mean, like, bids?
Yep.
No.
Well, not bids, but quotes that have
Many,
been
that's
updated
right.
and you feel confident?
Right.
So you feel confident that they're realistic numbers at this point, Michael?
I would say,
Yeah, I didn't exhaustively read everyone that was
no, I
submitted.
would say they're
This is
realistic,
how-
but, until you actually go out and get the bid, you don't know what the market is
Right.
doing out there.
Right, because you're comfortable though.
Yeah.
And then, did you already go to the capital budgets in the towns? Can you just remind me where you're at with that? You presented-
We've given them the higher number, the 416 number.
And we
Okay.
emailed them this
new
morning when it
information.
was
Okay.
published, and I sent it to the RC.
Great.
So we know with Sherborn, we need to do the notice of intent soon, by Thursday this week.
So we have to vote?
Yeah, we definitely need a high water.
And is the $1,694,000 number the total capital
That's fields and other things that are still
still
open for
ongoing?
discussion.
So hence the other funding.
Right. That's phase 2 of the master plan, the athletic master plan.
So that won't be included in the NOI.
No.
358 is the number.
If there's a
Divided.
vote for 358, we'll get the 358 paperwork to you.
Yes. Any other questions on 358?
So we need to make a motion.
Do I hear 358? Do I want? Do I have a motion?
Michael, would you like to make a motion?
Would you like to make a motion?
Sure, maybe.
Laura, would you like to?
Come on.
I will make that motion, sure, that we put forward, now I don't even know how to word it, I've never made a motion before. That we,
That's the time.
I know, really, thank you, Michael. Any suggestions?
Claire is also always really good.
Thank you, Claire. That we put forward to the towns of Dover and Sherborn, are we doing a notice of interest? Is that what it is? Intent?
Notice of intent.
Intent for a capital warrant item in the amount of $358,000 for capital improvements, renovations, whatever the appropriate word is.
Capital projects.
Capital projects on the regional campus.
Perfect.
I will happily second it.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Excellent. Well done, capital subcommittee. Excellent. All right. I just, in terms of the IMA, we did start the process. We reached out to both Mike Gimo and Carol Lisbon to ask if we should start the process of drafting an IMA for their consideration to build on the success of last year. We haven't heard anything to the negative about it, so we're going to proceed and start that process for this year. So that has been started. All right. Any other monetary things while we have our monetary people here? I don't think so. Oh, Brooke, sorry.
In the packet, although I don't see it here, the ones that's online, the last page of the enrollment form, the very bottom, little footnote, talked about Medco and the costs associated with Medco. Can you just tell us how those costs are handled? Are they, do the towns pay them? Do the special ed costs?
Right, they're born, those special education costs are in our budgets.
And is it shared by the towns according to the operating?
The assessment. Because they're in district.
And the grant, the MECO grant this year, MECO grant in totality is just about $200,000 for the entire program, to fund the program, which is really covers the cost of the director and transportation.
And nothing more.
And I'm sorry?
And nothing more. Nothing more than
Not a lot more. Not really.
Do those now that we're on this topic, where does the grant money flow in? Is it a special account?
It's a special revenue.
Special revenue fund, and so we directly expend for that, and if there was anything that wasn't covered by that grant,
in the budget.
then it spills over into the operating budget. Okay, so it's like those accounts that you've ever seen the Town of Sherborn annual report. There's like 5 pages of them after our operating statement summarized.
Any other questions? Guys patiently sat through. Well, all right. All right, we know what our homework is for the operating. All right, good. I think we're done with budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, guys. Okay, program of study changes. Oh, should we do campus wide communication?
Should we do wireless?
Sure.
Sorry, wireless, yeah, I missed that, sorry.
So Anthony Rataco is not here tonight to answer any technical questions, but the request was made we asked Anthony to assign a price tag for what it would be to have the exterior of the property, exterior of the buildings, wired as hotspots.
So I actually thought it was inside.
No.
I thought we were talking inside.
No,
I intended inside.
Well, inside will be covered as part of the Wi-Fi plan.
Okay.
This
all
is
right,
in the absence of a cell tower, how can parents communicate with their children?
But so do we have, I didn't know that we actually had an actual Wi-Fi plan. Do we have a Wi-Fi plan for inside?
Yeah, it's part of the technology supplement
Yeah,
that we approved.
Okay.
So what are you looking to do inside that you can't do?
Have any kind of signal?
So you can do Wi-Fi.
So, just so that you can, for the whole reason that we talked about the cell tower, so that if there's an emergency, you can communicate with a student inside the building. Because honestly, there's already right outside the building, you can already get a cell signal. I still would support doing Wi-Fi, but it's like, I feel like that's not really the
You
area
can't
that
get
we're talking
signals
about.
in a lot of carriers over in Inquest.
Right.
Well, anyway, my
That-
point is,
that's
I
not-
thought we were talking about inside, so I'm just, so if you could just, okay. So,
But this is great.
okay,
Right. This solves one of
okay.
the messages we kept hearing from parents, which is we need to be able to communicate with our children at pickup
When they're on the
when they're close to the building.
In some types of phones,
You can use
do
them.
have cell actual calling piece,
Yes.
but then the email.
Right, I just,
some of
okay,
that
as long as
text.
we also have a plan for inside, that's fine.
We can certainly have Anthony illuminate on that. His initial charge was to look at the exterior, so shortly.
And so this says parents will be able to connect, so we'll have some kind of separate public.
It actually would be wide open public. Because, you have people here on the weekends.
Right,
people
right.
It's nice.
Right.
That's
So-
a huge bonus.
Like a hotspot, it's like going to Starbucks.
The middle
just be here.
school,
Except we'll be here without a latte.
Right.
back to in the middle school,
Right.
interior-wise, we're looking to expand potentially the Wi-Fi.
Yes, that's what's in the
Is that-
technology supplement plan.
And those numbers
Yes.
are currently baked into the.
Yes, that's the 41,000 and some odd dollars that's in each high school and middle school budget on page
Technology hardware.
4 or 5 or whatever it
So
is.
what do we need to do with this?
So the question was, we were curious to know, we would love to move forward with this appetite for this. We could move forward with a favorable vote. We could use the superintendent's reserve account, which would seem an appropriate use for this, and we could get this done and put this whole matter.
I think that would be a really good
I think we
thing.
don't want to pursue any community interest group funding of this
No.
either.
I don't think, it's so,
I will make a motion to,
I don't know.
$12,490.
Okay, I will second that motion because it takes us out of the cell tower
On the
business.
memo.
Okay.
And interim wireless.
And
My wife will pursue that for us.
any other discussion on this? No? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All right, unanimous. Anthony can go,
Anthony will be
fill
thrilled.
those hotspots.
Okay, so now we do a little form distribution. This is for I feel like this is a Christmas gift. For Claire, Lori, Carolyn, and Michael. I don't know why. Oh, because you are, the rest of you are electronics, so you'll have this. This is the program studies update.
Yep.
You know what?
Because we attached some stuff to it, so Michael gets one. Richard has one. Lori?
I see.
Oh, I thought this was in the packet. though.
Yeah, this was in the packet.
You did make it.
She did
For us.
post-
Oh, not that she did, for the last one.
Right.
Yes.
Right, because there was the request for the course descriptions.
Paper Webex.
Right.
So, Mr. Smith.
All right.
So how would you like to have this expedited? Because I
A little punchy here.
I had a couple of questions. As always.
Yep, no problem.
Do we want to just ask the question?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
that's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Now, I want you to read through every line.
so it appeared as though on the technology ones, we're getting rid of computer applications and combining it with web design, and we're
That is correct.
changing a couple others to become a different.
Yes, so computer graphic design and computer applications and web design, which are in our current program of studies, those are being morphed into a course looking at more, yes, more progressive, updated, correct.
Sounds good. When somewhere we reference removing CP designation from electives, so what is the?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So Ellen and I had conversations and around this. So what was happening is in some of our electives, we were listing them as college prep, which was somewhat irrelevant simply because we were not including those into the overall GPA. Colleges were then saying, so for example, if you had a CP ceramics, they would say, oh, well, do you have an honors, or, you know, do you have, so they were then asking the question, so really it was kind of an outdated model. So we are eliminating them from the electives simply because it's irrelevant and they are not calculated into the GPA in and of itself, and it actually may allow students more opportunity if they wish.
So for instance, if you take the full year engineering course, it just appears in the transcript as engineering.
Right.
There's no designation whether it's CP or.
Right. The one exception was astronomy.
Because there's.
Because it's, yes, and it's the science credit.
Right, right, there are those.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then we're changing the LFTA and the EdTech 18 credits. So how does that?
Yeah, how's that going to work?
apply to
Okay,
current students?
yes,
And
so,
can current students do that change for next semester?
well, right now, the way that it's built in, they still, I have that ability to give them that flexibility, and we have, so absolutely, yes. So what this would do is, right now, the way it's written to the program of studies, 12 of those credits come from LFTA, and 6 come from EdTech, for a total of 18. We now are morphing that to say they need 18 total. It doesn't have to come from the EdTechs. It doesn't have to come from. So if you have a student who really is interested in taking course all 4 years, they take the 3, they can get their credits under that umbrella. They don't have to then also take an EdTech. So I still want to maintain some comprehensive nature to our high school, but giving kids the flexibility. So if they are a kid who really wants to have more of those computer application, those computer courses, they aren't then also forced to say, okay, now I need to do drawing 1. It, you know, in the end, it may still be a good opportunity lesson for them, but they're going to be miserable. You know, and I'd rather that they have more opportunities to do that. Now, for this year, yes, they can still petition me and Ellen to look at that, and we've done that for a couple of kids.
Well, two things. One, is that likely to have a beneficial effect on scheduling?
We think it will have a beneficial effect in terms of the elective areas where kids want to focus a little bit more, and I mentioned chorus because I do think chorus could be one of those courses that could benefit from it, because a student may say, you know, anecdotally talking to a few kids this year, I asked, okay, you didn't continue with chorus. Yeah, I wanted to get my ed tech course out of the way. So this would then allow them just to continue straight through.
Right, I actually was asking a different question just on the gridlock in the schedule. If people don't have to take a particular course, is it likely to have some overall
It could.
increase in
It
flow?
could. I think when Ann and I look deep into the schedule and peel back the different layers of the onion, we'll know more, but it certainly could. It won't make it more complicated.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Second question on general survival 1. I see that you've deleted starting a fire without the use of combination. I don't quite understand how that could be
For
possible.
survival, you really still need that skill.
That's my fault.
Actually, that overlaps with
It's one
social
thing
media.
yourself
No, sorry.
All right, let me find it.
It's very impressive to see a kid who can do that.
And
I'll give you the whole time.
they will be happy to see that archery is back. I've heard many
Yes.
complaints that
Sure.
archery
Is that part of general survival?
had
It certainly
somehow
can
dropped
be.
out of that. My other question was on the chemistry.
Yep. Honors chemistry.
Correct.
Yep.
And you deleted, I believe, John, A- grade requirement and put in that they have to speak to someone. Could the grade requirement stay and there be an option of?
So the rationale behind this, in speaking to the chemistry teachers as well as Mr. Chiklis, is some of the students who were in Algebra 1 CP as 8th graders, or perhaps even as 9th graders.
Maybe 9th grade, so it'll be called CP.
Right. Exactly, sorry. So 9th graders, those students typically struggle in the chemistry honors because of where their level of math is, because many of those kids have already started. So it was a process of looking at that not really being a good indication of where those students would be placed. Plus, the other factor is we wanted to look at their geometry honors grade, because that is one of the high school courses that they would be taking.
So you've taken it out not because of the grade level, but because you're not going from
different course.
Algebra 1 CP.
Right. You're sequencing. Yeah.
Because I hear issues, you know.
Right, this is actually tighter now because you have to have a grade B or better in geometry, which was never a requirement.
Right.
And a B or better in Algebra 1 honors, which is your 8th grade. So it's actually, it would not be open to someone taking Algebra 1 CP in 9th grade unless they had special dispensation.
Right.
Where is Algebra 1 honors?
8th grade.
It's not called on.
Yes,
Oh,
it is.
yeah, it is called on.
How quickly you forget. All right.
I think that's all I have.
Those are great questions. I have a high school question, but it's not program of study. So should, you need approval for this, right? You need to take a vote?
Yeah.
All right. Do I have a motion to accept the program of study amendments as presented tonight?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any more discussion? All those in favor? All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
The one question I had, and I don't think we need to do a lot of discussion, so I'll just throw it out there, is we liaise to every organization, I think, in the high school, except for guidance advisory. And therefore, almost by definition, the Challenge Success Program, which is very integrated in with guidance advisory. And I'd like to, and you don't have to answer today, or if you want to answer today, would it make sense to have a school, and I'm thinking as Challenge Success gets more traction, and if there were to be any recommendations that come out around, you know, homework policies or testing policies or assessment policies, if they're eventually going to come to the school committee, I'd love to see someone organically be part of that process as opposed to just as a end point.
Yeah, I don't know the history of why that is, and it's kind of an anomaly because it's really the only organization that really does not have it. So I would be in complete favor of that.
Is there any? So Lori, you can arm wrestle for it, but
I think it's part of our culture to have that opportunity with all of our organizations, and it just makes perfect sense to have it with
Okay.
Guidance advisory.
Okay, so why don't, if you can check with guidance advisory,
check
and
with
I'll
them.
talk to these two guys and
Sure.
figure out.
Yep, I'll have an answer for you tomorrow.
Awesome.
Great.
Because I think that makes sense, before we spend too much time on challenges.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, awesome. All right, that was it on, my last thing on communications is, I had a question. The websites are getting upgraded. Can you help me? Because the reason I ask is, I think we have an opportunity because John sent out, as part of the email blast, his high school update to the high school constituents that he brings to school committee. I think that we have an opportunity to, based on our cell tower experience, to better communicate what goes on at these meetings, whether it's taking selections of the students' updates and having those as little clips on a new and improved school committee website, having those headmaster updates easily found, and then maybe, the minutes so people can actually skim through what's going on in any given month. And so I was thinking that rather than trying to recreate the wheel and do some sort of newsletter, maybe it makes sense to just piggyback on whatever upgrades are going on to the website.
So the website's being completely overhauled, and it has a much different look and feel to it. We could do anything that the school committee would like to. I mean, obviously, all of your content from what are on the existing site will be moved over to a synonymous sort of platform. But we could do something different if there was a desire to do so from the school committee. I'm not sure what we would do.
The newsletter is inherently a push
right.
type of communication, and where they can opt in or opt out
right.
gives us information about how many people actually do have an interest in this. And I think if it was more of a passive, another place on the website to go to, I don't think it'll have the same impact.
Well, but if we had the website and then the link is in the email blast that goes
right.
out to
That's what I'm thinking. We would push.
We're
we would
making
push
that happen without having to recreate material.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love the headmaster notes. Those are great. I feel like I get so much information from the little bullets, and especially the stuff from the kids. It's great. So I think those are really helpful.
What I do see is a distinctly different communication than a weekly high school or middle school blast, if you pursue it.
Yes. The question is whether it's its own school committee newsletter that goes out once a month, or is it an update to the school committee page on the website that is a separate blast that says this page has now been updated after the last meeting. Click here to find out what's going on with the school committee.
Right, and there's a link to minutes, and there's a link to the video.
I think if you start to, you'll find out soon whether in fact people click. I mean, not everybody's going to click.
In the version of the one that I'm familiar with from Wellesley,
right.
They basically say we voted to do blah. John Smith gave a presentation on something, and if there are any relevant materials, then there's links or a report or whatever.
Right.
Like did a presentation on SAT scores, and then you'd have that linked back. But there would be like just little headline or bullets that tell people what are the key things that we've been
John,
involved
did you
in.
guys do the parent meetings on communication? Did that ever happen this year? I think Anne might have been looking to meet with parents and talk about, I thought in the fall there was an email.
Oh, yeah.
I was just wondering if you learned anything. Learned anything that might be useful to us, have somebody.
Right, well, we attended, Ann and I both attended one at Corn Hall's home. And we talked, about a wide range of topics. There was definitely the consensus for the high school parents and guardians that weekly email blast is really critical. We talked about shifting to our website. They still clearly want that weekly blast because it's something that they kind of have grown accustomed to, and it gives them that snippet, as Michael said, gives it that really quick focus of here's what's happening. One great suggestion came from a parent was, could you put something about in this newsletter?
That's totally transferable. Email.
Yeah, it's just a great idea, and I said, sure. It was great feedback, and so now we itemize it, say in this issue. So then, as a parent and guardian, you can choose, okay, the first two are of interest to me, and the last
3 or not, okay.
Right.
And you read the ones you need to.
Right. All right, well, then we'll work on that. I would like to continue to work on our communication, and whether that ends up being a push of a newsletter or a just more up-to-date website that has an RSS feed or a pushed link to it, we can talk about. All right, that was my other thing for the, so consent agenda. All right, 3 things on the consent agenda that were in the packet. First, the regional school committee meeting minutes of 11/4 are also known as the cell tower discussion part 2. Are there any comments to that one? Okay. Second, the obsolescence declaration of from the math department, and then third, the obsolescence declaration from the science department.
How can anything in that?
Answer that question. All right.
Smithsonian is
2 + 2
looking
is
for a
no longer 4.
There you go. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Do I have a second?
Second.
Anything else on that? All right, all those in favor of the consent agenda? Unanimous. All right, under the core review, the Sherborn School Committee meeting minutes, there are none from Dover. There is, as always, the enrollment report. Again, it will only be updated 3 times a year, so this is the static version that's in there, in case anyone wants to reference it. And then we will start collecting items for the January meeting. Carolyn, in her duties as secretary, has excitedly agreed to update the town reports
Very enthusiastic.
because she had nothing else to do over the Christmas holiday or the end of the year holidays, and so she will be spending her time updating the town reports that will go out to Dover-Sherborn.
It comes to us, sorry.
Come to us in January. Right. Sorry, I forgot that part of it. And then if you think of anything else for January, we know we have a couple of things from tonight.
Bond refunding.
Yep.
We'll have the actual motion. We have Jim Inget with us next month to do the audit, 2000 fiscal 14 financials. We'll hear from Karen on the international students.
Yep.
Payback on
Some of those capital
more
items.
detail on capital items where the numbers are a bit more solid.
And a budget update.
Yeah. All right.
That sounds
Excellent. All right, that's it. We are adjourned. Thank you.